Chapter 80. The Song Taoist looked down on everyone like an emperor. Now, he was the god of the Moyun mountain range. His dignity was sacred and inviolable. As he stood there, no one dared to look up at him. They could only tremble. Every word he said was an order. Who dared to defy him? His heart was suddenly filled with pride. Wasn't it what he had been pursuing all his life to make everyone kneel at his feet? Now, he was only second to one person, but above everyone else. It was enough that he could call the wind and summon the rain here. He had already become the emperor of the Moyun mountain range. An emperor should consider the matters of his people. He said loudly, "Since everyone is here today, we need to talk about the Yuman of Mount Fulong." In this operation, all the sects were ambushed and suffered heavy losses. These disciples were all our young juniors. Their wings were not fully grown yet, but their souls had already returned to the 9 heavens. This is a sad thing. The trip to Mount Fulong caused many sects to lose their outstanding disciples. It was a great loss to each sect. The Song Taoist words on the day of the celebration were definitely not just a simple condolence. Everyone was waiting for him to continue. I've been thinking about it for the past few days. What caused these things to happen? Do we know enough about the Yuman? If we want to eliminate these Yuman, how do we achieve victory in one blow? With the scattered strength of our cultivation world now, can we really eliminate the Yuman? Everyone held their breaths and listened attentively to the Song Taoist's words. They were faintly uneasy, since the Song Taoist was already a nascent soul true body. His mana was monstrous. As long as he made a move, the Yuman would definitely be eliminated. However, the Song Taoist did not seem to want to make a move himself. What did he want to do? I thought for a long time and summed up the cultivation levels of the disciples who were injured this time. I realized that these disciples were originally quite talented. Unfortunately, they lost their lives before they could fully display their abilities. In the end, it was because they did not receive enough training and lacked the ability to react to danger. Why was it that some of the sect's disciples were not injured, but others did not have any room to fight back? This was because the overall quality of the disciples taught by different sects was uneven. That's the worst part. Song Taoist's words were obviously hinting at something. Every sect had a different way of training their disciples, so the disciples they trained would definitely be different. This was something that everyone knew, so why did the pine tree Taoist emphasize this point? The Song Taoist's expression revealed a trace of regret. He said, if every disciple in the Zionist world received the same training, then they wouldn't be so vulnerable and flustered when faced with danger. But in the past, the various sects have been fighting openly and secretly, even killing each other. This kind of thing makes me feel very sad. After what happened to Yuman, I finally understood that if we really want to fight against Yuman, then everyone in the cultivation world must unite and unite as one. Condense together? What do you mean by condensing together? Many people's expressions began to change. Yuman and human beings are absolutely irreconcilable enemies. If we want to destroy Yuman, we have to unite. But many people have been unable to let go of the prejudice between sects and set each other up. This has seriously weakened the fighting strength of human beings. If all the Zionists were to help each other and let go of their hatred, I believe that we would definitely be able to destroy Yuman. The Song Taoist's words were becoming clearer and clearer. How could Zionists be free of sects? If there was only one sect, then there wouldn't be any sects, right? There are so many sects, and everyone's opinions are different. How can we all think together and use our strength together? I, Song Taoist, am not talented, but I have received everyone's favor. I have been guiding the entire cultivation world with the most excellent training system. Every disciple of my Song school is worthy of their own cultivation. I have always wanted to promote this training method to everyone, but in the past, everyone would rather train their disciples according to their own methods and not accept it. But now that Yuman is rampant, if everyone's disciples have the ability of my Song school's disciples, then I believe that destroying Yuman is just around the corner. Every disciple of a sect has the ability of a Song school's disciple. This seems like a very good thing, But what would be the result if all the disciples were to be branded with the Qingsong school? Would they still be members of their original sect? Qingsong Taoist master, what are you trying to say? Everyone was discussing spiritedly, and everyone's expression was very ugly. The elder of the Wuwen sect, Yin Taoist master, couldn't help but ask. The Qingsong Taoist has already reached the nascent soul stage. He is a high and mighty person, so Yin Taoist master also called him master. I will establish a Qingsong alliance. I hope that everyone will send all their disciples to this school, and I will train and guide them, so that they can become the backbone of the fight against Yumon in the future. You don't have to doubt my ability. I guarantee that I will be able to train all the younger generation into outstanding cultivators. The Qingsong Taoist naturally wouldn't directly say that he wants to unify the world. That would sound very bad. After beating around the bush for so long, the Qingsong Taoist goal has finally been exposed. Send all their disciples to the Qingsong Alliance? Then is there any need for other sects to exist? Qingsong Taoist master, what do you mean by this? You want all our disciples to enter your school? Then what about our school? Boyang Daran asked. Their Qintian school finally got third place in this competition. Originally, they could choose a group of outstanding disciples to revitalize the school next year. But the Qingsong Taoist wants to establish a Qingsong Alliance and personally train all the disciples? You still don't understand? On the front line of the fight against Yumon, we should be united and led by a righteous and respected person. Only then can we defeat Yumon. Before the matter of Yumon is resolved, there is no need for sects to exist. Elder Qingyu coldly snorted and loudly said, Wah! The audience was in an uproar. In front of Yumon, sects were no longer necessary? Then if Yumon wasn't eliminated, wouldn't it mean that only the Qingsong Alliance and Qingsong School were left in the cultivation world? Wouldn't this be a disguised form of annexing other sects? Everyone knew what Sima Zhao's intentions were. The Qingsong Taoist ambition was already very clear. He didn't care if Yumon was eliminated or not. His ultimate goal was to use the excuse of eliminating Yumon to annex all the sections. If all the sects agreed, would the Qingsong Taoist let everyone eliminate Yumon? Impossible. As long as Yumon didn't take the initiative to attack, why would the Qingsong Taoist take the initiative to deal with them? If this matter was delayed until all the sects existed in name only, then the Qingsong school would become the emperor of the cultivation world. This is clearly asking us to submit to the Qingsong school. Yes, this is too much. How can we give away the foundation of our ancestors so easily? But who dares to oppose? Many people were very indignant. This was a blatant threat to all the sects to submit to the Qingsong school and become the Qingsong school subsidiary. Every sect had its own heritage and spirit that needed to be passed down. Who would be willing to let their own disciples be branded with the Qingsong school's brand? However, they had no other choice. In front of nascent soul cultivator, would they dare to oppose? No. If they didn't oppose, how could they face their ancestors when their sects were destroyed? Hearing the Qingsong Taoist's ambition, Muyu suddenly felt a little sad. The conflict between humans and Yumon had never ended. He originally thought that after the Qingsong Taoist entered the nascent soul stage, he would directly attack Yumon. However, he was only using Yumon's name to realize his plan to unify the world. Yumon was insignificant in his heart. The Qingsong Taoist only cared about becoming the emperor of the world. You can go back and think about it. In a month, I will personally visit you to exchange opinions. The domineering aura once again enveloped everyone. This time, the Qingsong Taoist increased the pressure. Everyone felt as if they had been hit hard. Many people knelt on the ground. Everyone looked at the Green Pine Taoist in shock. It was only a month's time. The Green Pine Taoist would personally come and exchange opinions in a month. If they didn't agree, this sect would be destroyed, wouldn't it? An aura of despair spread throughout the square. Everyone knew that the cultivation world no longer belonged to them. The situation of numerous sects had been broken. A new kingdom was about to rise. The cultivation world had changed dynasties and changed its name to Qingsong. The disciples of the Song school looked at the visitors arrogantly. For them, who were originally disciples of the Song school, how could the status of other disciples be compared with theirs? Just like the countries in the mortal world, they were originally relatives of the royal family. The children of other courtiers were not worth mentioning. Strength can really change everything. Muyu sighed as he looked at the wailing of the people. Originally, he only needed to say a few words to solve the problem. However, he had to use the name of eliminating Yumon to achieve it. However, he couldn't say that the Song Taoist was a hypocrite. After all, there must be a reason for everything. The Song Taoist naturally didn't want to leave a bad reputation for future generations. Just like many emperors in the mortal world, they shouted, "Nobles, generals, ministers, generals, and generals have the guts," or Xingqian Sheng Wang of Great Chu. They used all kinds of names of rebellion to make things seem real. Otherwise, who would support and respond to them? The Song Taoist took advantage of the issue of Yumon to act. From the perspective of the human clan's morality, if any sect didn't cooperate, he had a reason to eliminate those sects that didn't submit to him. If he destroyed a sect for no reason, not only would he provoke the wrath of the heavens, but he would also go down in history in infamy. This was not what the Song Taoist wanted. All the sect leaders were in a daze. Now that the Song Taoist had reached the true body of a nascent soul stage, his words could destroy the foundation of all the sections. The foundation that their ancestors worked so hard to establish was all negated by a single sentence from the Song Taoist. In the cultivation world, strength was always respected. If the Song Taoist had made this decision when he was still in the Jinan period, many people would have resisted. However, now that the Song Taoist was in the nascent soul stage, he could kill a person with a single breath. How could they resist? What if I don't want to? However, at this moment, a deep voice spread throughout the entire Pine Tree sect, causing everyone to be stunned. There was actually someone who dared to say no so brazenly. Did this person want to die? This person didn't want to die because this voice was familiar to all the sect leaders. Brother Song Taoist, I was delayed by something. Please don't blame me for being late. Perfected Zhouhua's voice rolled like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears. His voice seemed to penetrate everyone's soul, making them tremble involuntarily. An aura that was not weaker than the Song Taoist descended from the sky. It was actually on par with the Song Taoist's aura. The spiritual aura in the air fluctuated, and Perfected Zhouhua slowly appeared, looking at the Song Taoist. The nascent soul stage. Perfected Zhouhua had also stepped into the nascent soul stage. Everyone was shocked as they stared at the two magnates in the sky. The surging spiritual energy swept over everyone, and the people below the stage were like ants. They could only tremble. Muyu looked at Perfected Zhouhua in disbelief. This old man had also reached the true body of the nascent soul stage. What he didn't understand was that it was impossible for anyone to break through to the nascent soul stage in the immortal confining prison. It was understandable that the Song Taoist had the help of the young man in red, but how did Perfected Zhouhua achieve the true body of the nascent soul stage? Song Taoist's face darkened. He didn't know that Perfected Zhouhua had also broken through to the nascent soul stage. Chapter 81. The two nascent soul stage cultivators stood there. Their surging auras engulfed each other and confronted each other, as if they wanted to suppress each other's aura. No one dared to make a sound. In front of these two giant gods, every sect leader below them was like an ant, not worth mentioning. It was as if the two gods in the sky were the only ones left in the world, secretly competing with each other. The Song Taoist and Perfected Zhouhua were once revered by tens of thousands of people in the cultivation world. Their statuses were almost the same. They thought that after the Song Taoist entered the nascent soul stage, Perfected Zhouhua could no longer be on the same level as the Song Taoist and could only submit. But who would have thought that Perfected Zhouhua would transform and become a nascent soul true body, just like the Song Taoist? Ever since the battle between Yuman and the humans in the Mayun mountain range, the nascent soul stage cultivators had disappeared without a trace. No one else had broken through to the nascent soul stage. But now, two nascent soul stage cultivators had appeared all of a sudden. How could this not be surprising? Brother Jihua, how have you been? The Qingsong Taoist smiled generously as if nothing had happened. But he was extremely angry in his heart. His ambition had just been exposed, and now it was ruined by perfected Jihua. If perfected Jihua was still in the Jindan period, he would definitely teach perfected Jihua a lesson as an example to others. However, at this moment, perfected Jihua was in the same realm as him. How could he get out of this situation? The Qingsong Taoist's violent spiritual energy suppressed Jihua Taoist in an overwhelming manner. He wanted to test perfected Jihua's strength. Perfected Jihua still had a smile on his face, but there was also an invisible surge of terrifying spiritual energy. Ripples spread out with him as the center. Like a stone falling into the water, the ripples returned to the Qingsong Taoist without showing any weakness. The collision between the two original infant stage cultivators created a terrifying storm in the air. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged and the sky changed color. The originally clear sky was instantly filled with dark clouds. However, the two people in the middle of the storm just stood there with their hands behind their backs. The corners of their clothes didn't even move. The wind seemed to avoid them and rushed towards the people below the stage. Everyone looked at the two people in the air in horror. The inexplicable gale made their clothes flutter, and they almost couldn't stand still. Everyone retreated in a sorry state, trying to stabilize their bodies. But in the blink of an eye, all the gales stopped, and the clouds quickly dispersed. Sunlight once again shone on everyone, and the terrifying aura also disappeared like melting snow. It was as if nothing had happened. There were still two people standing in the air with smiles on their faces. They looked at each other calmly, as if they were old friends. It was as if they were just exchanging a normal greeting. Taoist Brother Pine Tree, you're still as spirited as ever. Reverend Jihua laughed heartily. Same to you. Qingsong Taoist nodded politely. The two people seemed to be evenly matched. Neither of them had the upper hand, so they stopped in time. However, the real strength of the original infant stage had left a deep impression on everyone below the stage. They were in awe. Just the collision of their aura was already unbearable for people in the Jindan period. If they really attacked, wouldn't the whole school be destroyed? Is this the strength of the original infant stage? It's really terrifying. Reverend Jihua seems to be no weaker than Qingsong Taoist. This is really gratifying. Seeing that Reverend Jihua didn't lose to Qingsong Taoist, everyone felt as if they had seen their savior. Hope was rekindled in their hearts. They all thought that it seemed to be a good thing that Reverend Jihua had entered the original infant stage. At least, it stopped Qingsong School from dominating the world. For the time being, the cultivation world wouldn't go through many changes, and the foundation of each school should be preserved. After all, in the past, these two schools had dominated the cultivation world, but they never had the intention to destroy other schools. If they really thought that, then they were very wrong. In the past, they didn't destroy other schools because they were all in the Jindan period. Even if they wanted to conquer other schools, they would have to pay a huge price. It was impossible to not bleed. Now, they had entered the God realm. If the gods wanted to punish mortals, would they need to bleed? Brother Qingsong Taoist, I just heard that you want to establish the Qingsong Alliance to fight against Yaman together. I think it's a good idea. However, the way my Jihua school cultivates disciples is unique. Therefore, I also plan to establish the Jihua Alliance to absorb all the young disciples in the cultivation world and cultivate them into talents. Our two schools will compete to see which school cultivates disciples with greater potential. What do you think? Reverend Jihua didn't beat around the bush. He directly explained the purpose of his visit. The Qingsong Alliance and the Jihua Alliance? Everyone was dumbfounded. They thought that Reverend Jihua's appearance here as a nascent soul cultivator would stop the Qingsong school's plan to annex other schools. They didn't think that Reverend Jihua planned to use the Qingsong Taoist method to establish the Jihua Alliance to fight against the Qingsong Alliance. Then wouldn't the entire cultivation world be divided into two? Only the Jihua school and the Qingsong school would be left. Reverend Jihua and the Qingsong Taoist were two cunning old foxes. In the past, they couldn't unify the cultivation world because other schools didn't lack Jindan period cultivators. It wasn't easy to make other schools submit. However, now that they were both nascent soul cultivators, did they still need to consider the Jindan period of these schools? If they didn't agree, it would be settled with a snap of the fingers. The leaders of each school fell into despair again. Whether they joined the Qingsong Alliance or the Jihua Alliance, what was the difference for them? They would all be destroyed. Dying horizontally and dying vertically were the same thing. Their schools couldn't escape from destruction. However, the two people who represented the strongest in the Moyun mountain range stood there. No one dared to say a word against them. They didn't have the ability to say anything, and they didn't dare to say anything. The cultivation world still couldn't change the trend of change. It was just developing in a more subtle direction. It's rare that Reverend Jihua is so righteous. Since we're all thinking about the overall situation, the others shouldn't have any objections, right? Everyone can go back and think about it. Join the Qingsong Alliance or the Jihua Alliance. We'll give you an answer in a month. What do you think? The Qingsong Taoist said loudly. Reverend Jihua didn't undermine him. Although things didn't develop in the direction he expected, it was very close. The cultivation world was divided into two schools. In the future, only Jihua school was left as an opponent. The Qingsong Taoist's biggest reliance was the red-clothed young man behind him. As long as the red-clothed young man helped him destroy Jihua school, it would be much easier to do things. The Qingsong Taoist was not a fool. He already knew the limit of breaking through to the nascent soul stage. He broke through to the nascent soul stage with the help of the red-clothed young man. If Reverend Jihua didn't have anyone to help him, how could he achieve the nascent soul stage? He didn't fall out with Reverend Jihua because he guessed that the person behind him must be nearby at this moment. The red-clothed young man didn't want to appear in front of everyone. He must have his own concerns. After the matter was settled, he would definitely not tolerate the existence of Reverend Jihua, who was in the nascent soul stage. What Reverend Jihua said is right. Fellow Taoists, why don't you go back and think about it carefully? How about giving everyone a month? Reverend Jihua said with a fake smile. Should they join Qingsong school or Jihua school? This was also a problem, but it wasn't so important to them. No matter which side they joined, their school would eventually be destroyed. In that case, this matter didn't seem so important anymore. Muyu looked coldly at the two people who were arguing in midair. He didn't want to get involved in this matter. Whether the cultivation world followed Qingsong school or Jihua school, to him, it wasn't as important as saving his master. The Moyun mountain range was surrounded by a heaven and earth array, immortal confinement prison. After 10 years, this immortal confinement prison would kill all living things in the Moyun mountain range, including humans. At that time, what was the point of whether the Moyun mountain range belonged to Qingsong school or Jihua school? However, he began to wonder, who helped Reverend Jihua break through to the nascent soul stage? According to Mu Yu's understanding, there were only two people from the outside world who came here. One was the young man in red, and the other was Tian Ran. Mu Yu had long thought about it. If Tian Ran could follow the young man in red without being discovered, then her cultivation was definitely not as simple as the Jindan period. It was estimated that she had already stepped into the nascent soul stage. Could it be that Tian Ran was secretly helping Reverend Jihua in an attempt to interfere with the young man in red's plan? This was very likely, but Mu Yu didn't believe that the somewhat naive girl would have such an idea. The way she looked for people was so simple that she pulled a passerby to ask around. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. She also exposed herself so obviously. Would she really think of looking for Reverend Jihua as a helper? However, other than this explanation that was more reasonable, there was really no other explanation. If you caught my master, then you would definitely look for him. The young man in red should also be there. Mu Yu waited here. He wanted to take the risk to follow the Qing Song Taoist and see if he could find out any information. Perhaps his master was locked in a secret room in the Qing Song school by the Qing Song Taoist. Muyu couldn't find a secret room in such a large mountain. If he could control the land, there would be a glimmer of hope. The celebration ceremony was still going on, but there was one more person celebrating. Almost all the guests were frowning. In front of the Qing Song Taoist and Reverend Jiahua, they could only force a smile. Reverend Jiahua and the Qing Song Taoist chatted happily. It seemed that there was no estrangement because of what had just happened. They were still respectful to each other, as usual. Only they knew that at this moment, they couldn't wait to get rid of each other. The Qing Song Taoist and Reverend Jiahua concealed their killing intent very well. They had just entered the nascent soul stage and were not familiar with this stage yet. They didn't understand the gap between them and each other. Moreover, the people behind them told them to be careful, so they didn't fall out with each other. The celebration went on for a whole day. There were all kinds of complicated ceremonies. The Qing Song school was very efficient. In the blink of an eye, all the items needed for the celebration ceremony were prepared. Since Reverend Jiahua was also in the nascent soul stage, he was naturally here to celebrate with the Qing Song Taoist. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the Qing Song Taoist and Reverend Jiahua sat there. Everyone squeezed out a smile and came to the Qing Song Taoist and Reverend Jiahua. They bowed and said goodbye, then turned around and left in a daze. When they went back this time, they were probably worried about the problem of choosing a side. It was reasonable to say that the Qing Song school was more powerful. After all, the Qing Song Taoist was the leader of the cultivation world during the Jindan period. However, the Jiahua school was not to be trifled with. No matter which side they chose, they would be hated by the other side. It would be difficult for them to travel in the cultivation world in the future. After everyone left, Reverend Jiahua also bid farewell to the Qing Song Taoist in a friendly manner. Then, Brother Qing Song Taoist, I'll see you again someday. Brother Jiahua, be careful on your way back. After watching Reverend Jiahua step into the void and leave, the Qing Song Taoist snorted heavily and turned around to walk back to his residence. Chapter 82. Muyu was no stranger to the residence of the Qing Song Taoist. He had been here once before and had seen the true face of the red-clothed young man with his own eyes. Therefore, he was familiar with the place this time. The Qing Song Taoist walked slowly. He didn't emit any nascent soul aura, but his spirit and appearance were obviously different. His nascent soul cultivation seemed to have made him at least 10 years younger. Along the way, all the disciples of the Qing Song school bowed to the Qing Song Taoist when they saw him. Now that the Qing Song Taoist had become a legendary god, as a member of the Qing Song school, they were honored. The Qing Song Taoist only nodded slightly and didn't say anything. After passing through a small forest and turning around a rockery, they finally arrived at an elegant courtyard. The peach trees in the courtyard were still green. Muyu had already stepped into the peach trees before the Qing Song Taoist. The Qing Song Taoist opened the door. His room was neat and tidy. Every day, there were special disciples who came to clean it. Not even a speck of dust dared to fall. The Qing Song Taoist sat in front of a desk, flipping through several ancient books. He frowned from time to time and occasionally looked out the window. No one knew what he was thinking. He originally thought that today's ceremony would be the time for him to unify the Moyun mountain range. However, no one expected that a mortal Jiahua would appear out of nowhere and disrupt all his plans. It was this matter that made his mood a little chaotic. He couldn't calm down at all. A figure quickly passed through the courtyard and came to the door of the Qing Song Taoist room. This person was dressed in white and had an elegant demeanor. He was the Qing Song Taoist's outstanding disciple, Ba Liang. Master, disciple Ba Liang requests an audience. Ba Liang knocked on the door 3 times and said respectfully, "Come in." The Qing Song Taoist said lightly. Ba Liang carefully pushed open the door, then quickly walked in front of the Qing Song Taoist. He knelt down and kowtowed, respectfully saying, "Master, you were looking for me?" The Qing Song Taoist slowly closed the ancient book. He raised his head and asked solemnly, "Ba Liang, What about the matter I asked you to do? Bai Liang shook his head slightly, a look of guilt on his face. Master, everything was originally under control. However, there's been no progress regarding Jianing and Qinfeng. Now that Taoist master Zhuhua has broken through to the nascent soul stage for some unknown reason, there is nothing I can do. Sword, shadow, dust, wind? Outside the window, Mu Yu perked up and immediately pricked up his ears. They had mentioned his master. Was the Qingsong Taoist related to his master's disappearance? However, what did it mean that Jianing and Qinfeng had not made any progress? They had captured his master, but did his master not submit to them? You continue to deal with Jianing and Qinfeng. As for Taoist Master Zhuhua's matter, I will deal with it. The Qingsong Taoist said in a deep voice. Yes, master, Bai Liang said. Then he showed a trace of worry. He hesitated for a moment, then said, Master, I know that your cultivation is now very high, but I'm afraid that Taoist Master Zhuhua is not an ordinary person. Are you really sure? Of course I'm sure. I need you to prepare for the Qingsong Alliance. Although Zhuhua School has a foot in this matter, our goal will not change. The cultivation world must be firmly controlled by our Qingsong School. The Qingsong Taoist's eyes flashed with a resolute light. Master, what do you want me to do specifically? Bai Liang looked at the Qingsong Taoist with eyes full of hope. He had followed the Qingsong Taoist since he was a child, so he knew the Qingsong Taoist plan very well. He also looked forward to unifying the entire Maoyun mountain range. After all, even if the Qingsong Taoist had become a nascent soul supremacy, there would be a day when he abdicated. At that time, the Maoyun mountain range would naturally be under Bai Liang's control. Ask the two elders, Qing Yu and Qing Yuan, to go with you to each sect. Whether it's threatening or persuading, let them understand that between the Qingsong Alliance and the Zhuhua Alliance, they must choose the Qingsong Alliance. Yes, I will not let you down, master. Bai Liang was overjoyed. The two elders, Qing Yu and Qing Yuan, were going to go personally. With their cultivation, it would be easy to intimidate the leaders of those small sections. You may leave. Bai Liang retreated and closed the door behind him. After a while, a disciple walked into the Qingsong Taoist room with a basin of water. The Qingsong Taoist sat on the bed. The disciple took off the Qingsong Taoist's shoes and socks and helped the Qingsong Taoist wash his feet. At the same time, a person pushed the door open and came in. Muyi took a closer look. It was actually Qing Mei. Father. Qing Mei walked in leisurely and sat beside the Qingsong Taoist. Mei-er, you're here. The Qingsong Taoist looked at Qing Mei lovingly. Every time he saw Qing Mei, the Qingsong Taoist would always think of the threat of the red-clothed young man. Qing Mei was now an adult, but her cultivation was still too low. If the Qingsong Taoist was not here, she would definitely be remembered by many cultivators. Qing Mei hesitated for a moment and said, Father, I want to tell you something. There's someone I like. The Qingsong Taoist was slightly startled. He didn't expect to hear this news. As a father, he was most afraid that the cabbage he had painstakingly raised would be eaten by a pig. He hurriedly asked, Mei-er, who is that person? When did this happen? Qing Mei pursed her lips and said, His name is Cheng Yan. He's from a falling dust sect. Falling dust sect? Is that the young man the falling dust sect sent today? The Qingsong Taoist frowned. Qing Mei nodded and said, Father, I know what you're thinking. Don't look down on his lowly background. He's actually a very outstanding person. Now, the entire cultivation world is yours. In the future, he will also listen to your orders. Don't object, okay? The Qingsong Taoist sighed and said, Mei-er, you can't be with him. The situation is very complicated right now. I don't want anything to happen to you. Qing Mei gritted her teeth and said, Why? He's not even 20 years old, and he's already in the Jindan period. Even this kind of natural talent isn't enough? The Qingsong Taoist suddenly asked, If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. You said that he's already in the Jindan period when he's not even 20 years old? Muyu's heart thumped. Could it be that the Qingsong Taoist had already noticed something? Qing Mei hurriedly said, "Yes, he's a man of striking appearance. He won't let me down in the future. He can protect me." Silly child, the only person who can protect you in the current situation is your father. The Qingsong Taoist sighed. If it wasn't for the red-clothed young man's threat, why would he be worried about anything happening to Qing Mei? You could protect her? The red-clothed young man sneered and appeared in the room like a gust of wind. The Qingsong Taoist suddenly stood up. His face alternated between red and white, and he didn't even dare to speak. It was Qing Mei who shouted, "How dare you? Who are you? How dare you trespass into my father's room?" "Qing Mei, don't be rude. You guys go out first. This is an important guest I've invited." The Qingsong Taoist waved his hand, and the disciple hurriedly left with the water. Qing Mei glanced at the red-clothed young man a few more times, and then left unwillingly after being scolded by the Qingsong Taoist. Seeing that Qing Mei had left, the Qingsong Taoist hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed. "Master, please forgive me. My daughter was rude. Please don't take offense." "Get up," the red-clothed young man said indifferently. The Qingsong Taoist didn't get up. He was still kneeling on the ground, trembling, and said, "This old servant is incompetent. There's still no news of Jian-ing or Chen-feng. Master, please punish me." During the day, the Qingsong Taoist was still awe-inspiring. Now, he was kneeling in front of the red-clothed young man like an incompetent servant, waiting for his master to punish him. In this world, only strength was supreme. Only with strength could one be called a king. Without strength, one could only be a servant. Muyu didn't pay attention to the two different sides of the highly respected Qingsong Taoist. He got a message that the Qingsong Taoist didn't have any news of Jian-ing or Chen-feng. That meant that his master wasn't in Qingsong school. They didn't catch his master. This made Muyu feel relieved, but a new problem appeared. If his master wasn't here, then where was he? The red-clothed young man snorted and frowned. "Get up and talk. I don't need a servant who can only be a yes man. I need someone who can do things. You've always been the most powerful person in the Moyun mountain range. I asked you to find a person, but you don't have any clue?" The Qingsong Taoist quickly stood up and said, "Master, I've already asked Bailiang to do it. Bailiang is the most familiar with the affairs of the cultivation world. I believe you will soon have an idea. I don't care how you deal with it. I need you to send Jian-ing and Chen-feng to me as soon as possible." The red-clothed young man deliberately emphasized the words, "as soon as possible." Muyu knew why the red-clothed young man emphasized as soon as possible. He was afraid that he didn't care about Jian-ing and Chen-feng, but about Jian-ing and Chen-feng's secrets. Even Muyu didn't know what secrets his master had that made him so important. The Qingsong Taoist nodded fearfully and said, "Master, Jinren Jiuhua has also stepped into the nascent soul stage. It's impossible for him to have no one to help him. If there is someone behind him, then it will be difficult for me to unify the cultivation world. I don't care what means you use. Let me tell you, the person behind Jinren Jiuhua is also looking for Jian-ing and Chen-feng. If he finds the real Jian-ing and Chen-feng, then the consequences will be very serious. At that time, you won't be able to protect yourself, let alone your daughter." The red-clothed young man said coldly, "I'll do my best. I won't let you down." The Qingsong Taoist's face was extremely pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He didn't dare to be careless when it came to matters involving his daughter. "You don't have to worry about the person behind Jinren Jiuhua for the time being. You're no match for him. I'll take care of it," the red-clothed young man said. He disappeared again, as if he had never been there. He came and went without a trace. The Qingsong Taoist sighed. It was indeed a glorious thing to be the master of the cultivation world in the Moyun mountain range. But he, the so-called emperor of the cultivation world, was just a servant of the red-clothed young man. However, the red-clothed young man only wanted to be the mastermind behind the scenes and didn't want to show himself. Therefore, the Qingsong Taoist was only under one person and above everyone else. He could accept this situation. Muyu also left the Qingsong Taoist yard and appeared in a place far away from the Qingsong school. He looked at the Qingsong school from afar, and his mood was not as depressed as it was a few days ago. The red-clothed young man didn't catch Jianing and Feng, so his master was not in any danger. Could it be that Tian Ran has found my master? In order to prevent the red-clothed young man from harming my master, she took him away by force? Muyu thought. He wanted to go to the Jihua school. If Jinren Jihua became a nascent soul venerable because of Tian Ran's help, and Tian Ran had always been protecting Jianing and Feng, then his master was very likely to be in the Jihua school at this moment. Muyu had a bad impression of the Jihua school. The disciples of the Jihua school were arrogant and domineering, and Muyu had destroyed their cultivation. Moreover, Zhu Wenxing had shamelessly stolen Muyu's credit on Mount Fulong. However, if Tian Ran was the person behind Jinren Jihua, then the Jihua school would be on his side in the future. Chapter 83. By the time he left Jihua school, it was already very late. Muyu didn't head in the direction of Luochen Mountain. He wanted to go to Jihua school to find out whether Tian Ran was the one behind Daoist Jihua. However, Muyu had never been to Jihua school before, so he didn't know the exact location of Jihua school. Therefore, he decided to go to the school and ask around. The school wasn't far from Qingsong School, so Muyu arrived at the school after flying for more than 2 hours. Although the school was brightly lit at the moment, there were very few people he could see. Muyu had no choice but to land in the school and walk towards the small courtyard of his sect. He passed through an arch and turned around to arrive at a huge square. In the center of this open space, there was a large gray stone quietly standing there. It looked simple and unadorned, but under the illumination of the moonlight, it revealed a strange halo. Muyu couldn't help but stop and look at this stone. This was the spirit testing stone that determined his life and the stone that determined the fate of all the cultivators in the Maoyun mountain range. This stone marked all the cultivators with a mark of their respective sections. However, after the Qingsong Taoist and Daoist Jihua entered the nascent soul stage, its existence seemed to become dispensable. In the future, no matter how talented the disciples it tested were, they would always belong to Qingsong School or Jihua School. Many of the Pine Tree sect's disciples shone brightly here. Their talents were outstanding, causing many self-cultivators to be incessantly moved. Little Tiger, who had a cyanate talent, was the center of attention for a time. Muyu originally had a purple talent that could shock all the cultivators. However, because he didn't dare to reveal his ability to control wood, he became a gray disciple who was looked down upon. In the end, he entered the Luochen sect and became a disciple that everyone laughed at. However, Muyu never regretted it because he knew that he had made the right choice. If he hadn't been unwilling to give up and wanted to take the test again, he probably wouldn't have met his master. Now, under his master's guidance, he had become an outstanding cultivator and defeated the genius Little Tiger in front of everyone, greatly venting for himself. He should have replaced Little Tiger as the new genius, but he couldn't feel happy at all. However, his master's whereabouts were unknown because a mysterious red-clothed young man came to the Maoyun mountain range. Although Muyu was sure that his master was fine, there was still a knot in his heart because the red-clothed young man was still looking for him. Muyu walked across the open space, through a door, and arrived at the residence of the Grey Disciples. At this moment, there were still some young disciples in the residence of the Grey Disciples. They hadn't slept yet, and when they saw Muyu, their eyes were filled with awe. Muyu was a disciple of a sect, while they were just Grey Disciples of the academy. They were like servants, so these Grey Disciples were naturally envious. "Manager, I'm sorry." Muyu clenched his fists. When he first stepped into the cultivation world, the first person he came into contact with was Deacon Sun. This kind old man, whose life was full of sorrow, was hated by Little Tiger because he protected Muyu. In the end, he died in the demonic beast forest. Muyu still thought that he would come back and take Deacon Sun away from the school. Unfortunately, he was forced to choose another way to leave here. "Young master, which sect are you from? What can I do for you?" Sensing the fluctuation of spiritual power on Muyu, a middle-aged man hurried over and asked respectfully. Muyu remembered this middle-aged man. He had replaced Deacon Sun as the school's steward. Everyone called him Deacon Liu. What did it matter which sect he was from? Soon, only the Chingsong school and the Jihua school were left in the Moyun mountain range. Many people in the school probably didn't know what had happened today. It's so late. Why haven't you gone to bed yet? Muyu asked casually. Young master, you don't know. The Chingsong school's patriarch Verdant Pine has achieved the nascent soul true body. This is a joyous event in the cultivation world. In the evening, young Master Little Tiger from the Chingsong school came to the school. He used to ask us not to sleep at night and to listen to his orders at any time. He is Patriarch Verdant Pine's disciple. How can we not listen to him? Deacon Liu didn't show any dissatisfaction on his face. Little Tiger was Patriarch Verdant Pine's disciple. If he served Little Tiger well, it would be a great honor for him and an opportunity to be rewarded. If he was lucky, he might even be able to join the Chingsong school. Little Tiger is also in the school. His master just held a celebration. What is he doing here? Muyu asked, puzzled. Deacon Liu shook his head quickly. He seemed to know something, but he didn't dare to say it. Muyu didn't force him. To be honest, he was very curious. It was reasonable to say that Little Tiger should be waiting respectfully by the Chingsong Taoist side at this moment, instead of spending the night at the school. Muyu went straight to the small courtyard of his school. However, when he passed by the side courtyard of the Chingsong school, the exquisite door of the side courtyard suddenly opened. Muyu saw the person he didn't want to see the most. Little Tiger walked out in high spirits. Muyu didn't want to meet him, so he turned into a dark corner. Little Tiger walked on the same path that Muyu had just taken. He seemed to be going to the residence of the Gray Disciples. Muyu became angry when he thought of Deacon Sun's death. This guy had always looked down on the Gray Disciples. He was afraid that nothing good would come out of going to the Gray Disciples' courtyard this time. Muyu followed him. As soon as Little Tiger walked into the courtyard of the Gray Disciples, Deacon Liu immediately bowed to him and said with a flattering face, Young master, everything is ready. Bring him to me. Little Tiger didn't even look at Deacon Liu. His tone was very arrogant, and he didn't take Deacon Liu seriously at all. He was originally a dazzling star in the cultivation world. Now that his master had achieved the true body of the nascent soul, his status would only be higher in the future. Perhaps many headmasters would have to salute him when they saw him. A mere deacon of the school was nothing in his eyes. You three, come here quickly. This is Little Tiger, the disciple of ancestor Chingsong and the most talented person in the cultivation world. Take good care of him. Deacon Liu waved his hand, and 3 girls around 15 or 16 years old walked over timidly. These 3 young girls were all young, and they were all Gray disciples of the academy. They all looked pretty and lively. They had just reached the stage of puberty. Their bodies were curvaceous, but they still had a trace of childishness. Their eyes were full of reverence and hope. Chingsong School was the #1 school in the world, and Chingsong Taoist was like a living immortal. As his disciple, Little Tiger's status was naturally not ordinary. Little Tiger looked at the 3 girls with satisfaction and nodded. Not bad, Deacon Liu. You do things very quickly, unlike your predecessor, who was unwilling to do such a small thing. You're so diligent, so I'll definitely reward you in the future. Take this spirit stone first. That stubborn Deacon Sun can't accept this spirit stone, so I sent him to the demonic beast forest to see the world. Thank you, young master. Thank you. I have a different philosophy from Deacon Sun. That old guy Deacon Sun is too rigid. He only has himself to blame for everything. Deacon Liu was flattered and stuffed the spirit stones into his robes. He was the clearest about Deacon Sun's death, but Xiaohu had recommended him to take over Deacon Sun's job and become the steward of the academy. How could he possibly reveal Xiaohu's matter when it came to earning spirit stones? Let's go. Little Tiger's eyes greedily stared at one of the girl's breasts. He swallowed his saliva and looked somewhat impatient. The 3 girls didn't dare to say anything and could only obediently follow Little Tiger. Little Tiger took 2 of the girls' hands and brought them back to his room. Take off your clothes. Little Tiger closed the door and said with a wicked look. The 3 girls were at a loss. 2 of them seemed to know what they were going to face and consciously took off their clothes. Suddenly, the room was exposed. but one of them retreated to the door and refused to take off her clothes. "You met a tough one? Then let me give you a hand." Little Tiger smiled evilly and slowly approached the girl. "Young master, don't do this, don't do this." The girl struggled, unwilling to give in. But how could she be a match for Little Tiger, who was in the foundation establishment stage? Her struggle was destined to be futile. Little Tiger's clothes had already been completely removed. He hugged her and pressed her down on the bed. She screamed in panic, but no one paid attention to her. Muyu was on the roof of the Ching Song School's side courtyard. He didn't see the situation inside, but he could guess what happened. He didn't expect Little Tiger to do such a shameless thing. An unknown flame of anger burned in his heart. When Deacon Sun was still alive, with Deacon Sun's character, he wouldn't have allowed Little Tiger to do such a thing. So he killed Deacon Sun and replaced him with Deacon Liu, who was more agreeable to him. On the night of his master's celebration, he actually dared to come down the mountain to do such a thing. He was really bold and daring. Muyu squeezed into the room through the beam on the roof. Looking at the indistinct figure behind the gauze curtain, killing intent rose in his heart, and he unsheathed the shadow clone sword in his hand. This kind of person, if I have to kill, then so be it. However, at this moment, the window suddenly bounced open and a black figure flashed in. The candles in the room were extinguished by a few bursts of spiritual energy. Muyu was stunned and didn't rush out of the beam. At this time, who else would dare to barge into Little Tiger's room other than him? "Who is it?" Little Tiger heard the strange noise and shouted loudly. He climbed out of the bed naked and didn't even have time to pull up his pants. He was a bit angry. Just now, he was about to reach a certain point and was interrupted at this time. He almost couldn't breathe. Ching Song School's side courtyard was an important place in the eyes of outsiders. Moreover, now that the Ching Song Taoist had become a living immortal, who would dare to challenge the dignity of Ching Song School? In the pitch-black night, one couldn't even see their own fingers. Little Tiger's eyes hadn't adjusted to the darkness. Just as he was about to light the lamp, 5 bright lights suddenly appeared in front of him. Under the moonlight, they flickered with a cold light. "What do you want to do?" Before Little Tiger could finish his words, his last few words turned into a few grunts. Then he covered his throat in horror and choked on something, unable to speak. He wanted to shout, but blood came out of his mouth, making it impossible for him to shout. He still wanted to do something, but his consciousness gradually blurred. Blood spurted out, and his whole body fell on its back. Until his death, he still didn't understand. His master, the Ching Song Taoist, was already in nascent soul supremacy. As the first disciple of the Ching Song Taoist, he would definitely be able to summon the wind and summon the rain in the cultivation world in the future. He would be able to use his master's prestige to play with the entire cultivation world. However, before he could enjoy all of this, his life was unexpectedly ended for no reason. No one would have thought that on the day of the Ching Song Taoist celebration, Little Tiger would die tragically in the school. Muyu also couldn't understand, because the black figure was too fast. Evie didn't see it clearly before it killed Little Tiger. Then it went out the window and disappeared. Muyu chased after it. He wanted to know what the black figure was and why it killed Little Tiger. The courtyard of the Ching Song School was very big. At this moment, other than Little Tiger, none of the Ching Song School disciples were in the school. They were all in their own sects holding the celebration for Patriarch Ching Song. Muyu saw the black figure turn into a dark corner of the courtyard. He also chased after it, but just as he landed on the ground, he felt a pain in his chest and was sent flying. The black figure's claws fell towards Muyu's neck. Muyu only saw a pair of green eyes that emitted a cold light in the darkness. Muyu hurriedly protected his neck. His shadow clone sword had already risen into the air. However, the claws didn't fall. It seemed that the figure didn't want to be entangled with Muyu. It just dodged and then disappeared. Muyu got up. His surroundings were dark. The black figure had already disappeared. The 3 girls' alarmed cries resounded throughout the courtyard. Unfortunately, no one paid any attention to them. That was because this was the courtyard of the Pine Tree sect. Everyone in the academy knew that nothing would happen here. Even if there were girls' alarmed cries, no one would pay any attention to them. Chapter 84. There were people dying every day. Some people just died silently. But some people's deaths would cause a huge sensation. Xiaohu's death was like a huge rock being thrown into a calm lake, stirring up thousands of waves. The entire cultivation world was in turmoil. The Qingsong Taoist had already stepped into the nascent soul stage and achieved his nascent soul true body. No one dared to challenge his prestige. Xiaohu was a famous genius disciple of the Qingsong school, but he died in the school, which was founded by the Qingsong Taoist. This was a great humiliation, not to mention that the day was the celebration of the Qingsong Taoist becoming a nascent soul venerable. Now, the day of the Qingsong Taoist celebration became the death anniversary of his disciple. One could imagine how angry the Qingsong Taoist was. Investigate it. If you can't find out, then there's no need for you to live. The Qingsong Taoist said angrily to the group of gray disciples of the school. The gray disciples all knelt on the ground and trembled. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They saw the legendary nascent soul venerable ancestor. This should be something to brag about, but no one felt excited. The terrifying pressure of a nascent soul venerable ancestor's anger terrified everyone. If it wasn't for the Qingsong Taoist restraining himself, these people's hearts and veins would have been shattered and they would have been buried with him. No one pitied these gray disciples. Their lives were worthless. Even if the Qingsong Taoist killed all the gray disciples of the school, every self-cultivator would take it for granted. After all, Xiaohu's life was lost in the school. His life was more precious than many people in the cultivation world, let alone these gray disciples. The gray disciples present didn't know what happened. They didn't know why Xiaohu came to the school on the day of the celebration. They also didn't know why Xiaohu died naked on his bed. They also didn't know why Xiaohu's heart was missing. They only knew that on the second day, a gray disciple who was cleaning the room pushed open the door and saw bright red blood staining a naked youth. Even the white bedsheets were dyed red. It was so shocking that it almost scared the gray disciple out of his wits. There were 5 deep claw marks on Little Tiger's neck, which had cut through the blood vessels in his throat. Fresh blood spurted out and splattered on the ground, which had already solidified. There was a hole in his chest that was clearly visible. His beating heart had already disappeared. By the time the Qingsong Taoist got the news and rushed over, it was already noon. The blazing sun was roasting the earth, but the academy was shrouded in a layer of bone-chilling frost. All the cultivators who spent the night in the academy felt as if they had fallen into winter. Master, junior martial brother, seems to have been attacked by a demonic beast. The claw marks and the method of grabbing his heart seemed to be the work of a demonic beast. However, I have asked around, and there are no traces of demonic beasts in Qingshu City. Demonic beasts do not have intelligence, and it is impossible for it to appear in the academy. It is even more impossible for it to bypass so many people and go straight to Little Tiger's room. Bao Yang's face was tense as he carefully examined the corpse. His heart was heavy. If it's not a demon beast, then it's a cultivator. Why did Xiaohu show up at the academy yesterday? Qingsong Taoist asked coldly. No one knew. Perhaps only Deacon Lu knew the reason for Xiaohu's appearance here. However, Deacon Lu was already scared out of his wits. His corpse was found in his room with a rope around his neck, hanging from the beam. He had already committed suicide to escape punishment. Master, junior martial brother, is bold and unrestrained. Looking at the traces on his corpse, I am afraid that he had sex with someone last night. Ba Liang whispered. What about the person who had sex with him? Qingsong Taoist asked again. Ba Liang shook his head because no one knew where the person who had sex with Little Tiger went. This matter was only known by some gray disciples. However, those gray disciples were too scared to speak in front of the Qingsong Taoist. If they wanted to find out the truth, they could not interrogate them in front of the Qingsong Taoist. The 3 girls were taken away by Muyu. Muyu sent them out of the city and told them that they could not return home or go to the academy. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. Muyu could not leave them there because he knew that if they were in the academy, they would most likely accompany Xiaohu on the road to the netherworld. Master, You said that with your current cultivation level, no one would dare to do anything to us. Only the Jihua school would dare to go against us. I just found out that the Jihua Taoist master was resting in the academy last night. However, he left early in the morning. What do you think? The Jihua Taoist master, Qingsong Taoist, was furious. The Jihua school had reached the point where it could compete with the Qingsong school. In the whole world, only they would dare to do such a thing. However, Qingsong Taoist did not let anger get to his head. He did not have any evidence. It would be ridiculous if he rushed to someone else's mountain gate to denounce them. So many people stayed in the academy last night. He could not rule out the possibility that some sects were angry at Little Tiger because their sects were about to be destroyed. No matter who it is, I need evidence. Then I will personally make them understand that they will pay 10 times the price for killing my disciple. Qingsong Taoist's cold voice resounded in the academy. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to look at the Qingsong Taoist. Muyu had already left the academy. He tried to find out who the black shadow that killed Little Tiger was last night. Unfortunately, the black shadow was faster than him. In the blink of an eye, the black shadow killed everyone and retreated without any hesitation. Muyu was now at the foot of the Jihua School mountain. He did not go up the mountain because he was in trouble. The Jihua School's mountain peak towered into the clouds. The bottom of the mountain was made of rocks, while the top of the mountain was covered with lush trees. However, Muyu could not get close to the Jihua mountain because it was protected by a powerful force. It was a nascent soul stage protective array. Without permission, one could not enter. The Jihua School was really smart to set up such an array. Qingsong School also had an array. However, the Qingsong School's mountain was useless against Muyu, who could blend into the trees. On the other hand, the Jihua School's mountain blocked Muyu's path up the mountain. Not being able to go up the mountain meant that he could not confirm whether the perfected Jihua had Tian Ran support or whether his master was in the Jihua School. He was very distressed. He circled the foot of the mountain for half a day and tried all kinds of methods. However, he still could not get close to the mountain. In the end, he could only give up helplessly. When Muyu returned to the academy, it was already heavily guarded by the Qingsong School's disciples. Because of Little Tiger's death, the entire Qingshou city was shrouded in a thick layer of haze. Even the mortals did not dare to make any noise. At this time, self-cultivators were not allowed to enter the city directly. Everyone had to register. Is there need to be so troublesome? He originally planned to rest at the academy for one night and rush back the next day. However, when he entered the academy, he was interrogated by the Qingsong School's disciples, which made him very upset. The Qingsong School's disciples did not have a good attitude. When they found out that Muyu was from the Luochen sect, their eyes became even more unfriendly. Then, they arrogantly pointed their fingers at him. Luochen sect? Oomph. After the patriarch achieves the nascent soul, he can finally clean up those trashy sections. How can a sect with less than 10 people be called a sect? This kind of sect should be given to the Jihua School. If it joins our Qingsong School, I will feel ashamed. A Qingsong School's disciple said disdainfully. The Luochen sect defeated your Qingsong School in the competition. If your Qingsong School doesn't want it, why would our Jihua School want it? At this moment, a few people behind Muyu sneered. Muyu turned around and looked at the 4 people. They were all wearing the Jihua School's uniform. The leader was Tu Panshan. Muyu had seen him during the competition. He was one of the main forces of the Jihua School. How dare you Jihua School come to the school? The leader of the Qingsong School's disciples was Sun Yin. They were also certain that Xiaohu's death was related to the Jihua School. When they saw that Tu Panshan of the Jihua School still dared to bring 3 people to the school, they became angry. Why can't we come to the school? Although the school was built by your sect, our Jihua School paid the same amount for its maintenance. We can come if we want to. What can you do about it? Tu Panshan sneered. He also knew that Xiaohu's death had spread throughout the cultivation world in a day. It was such an uproar that he was aware of it. However, now that perfected Jihua was also in the nascent soul stage, their Jihua School was not inferior to the Qingsong School. Therefore, they had nothing to fear. Cut the crap. No matter who you are, you have to obediently accept your registration today. Where are you from? What sect are you from? Your name, gender, and the magical weapon you are using. You can only enter after you write everything down here. The Ching Song School's disciple guarding the school's entrance slapped the paper on the table. Tu Panshan was immediately unhappy. You Ching Song School are used to being domineering. Do you really think that you are invincible? How dare you block our Jihua School's way? Jihua School? Oomph. Why wouldn't we dare? Jihua School can't get away with Xiaohu's death. You better behave yourselves. Sun Yin sneered. The Ching Song School and Jihua School had been secretly fighting for a long time. Both of them had nascent soul cultivators backing them up, so they were never afraid. How dare you blame us for Xiaohu's death? How dare you? Tu Panshan said angrily. Muyu was too lazy to pay attention to the dogfight between the two sect's disciples. No matter who won or lost, it had nothing to do with him. He turned around and walked directly to the school's entrance. Stop! Sun Yin stretched out his arm to stop Muyu. Low-tier sects like the Falling Dust sect are not allowed to enter the school. When was this rule set? Muyu had accumulated a lot of anger when he was ordered around to fill in the messy information. Now that he was not allowed to enter after filling in the information, even a normal person would get angry, let alone Muyu. Sun Yin looked at him with contempt and said, I set the rule. If I say you can't enter, then you can't enter. A trash sect disciple like you doesn't deserve to enter the school. If you lose to a trash sect disciple in a competition, then what does Ching Song School count for? Muyu looked at the Ching Song School's disciples' arrogant faces and thought that if all the other sect's disciples entered the Ching Song School alliance in the future, wouldn't they be looked down upon by the local disciples of Ching Song School? How dare you? Sun Yin waved his sleeve angrily and pointed a flying sword at Muyu. Xiaohu was defeated by your sneak attack because he was careless. Do you really think you can look down on us just because you beat Xiaohu by luck? Even your master has to kneel and kowtow in front of our Ching Song sect's ancestral master. Today, I will teach you a good lesson. Careless? Sneak attack? Luck? Muyu was so angry that he laughed. The Ching Song School's disciples had always been arrogant and would never admit defeat. Even if Xiaohu lost to Muyu from the Falling Dust sect, they would not admit it because their ancestral master, Ching Song Taoist, was a cultivator at the nascent soul stage. However, these disciples of the Pine Tree sect didn't know that founding Master Pine Tree, who was as honorable as an immortal in their hearts, was actually just an old servant kneeling in front of someone else in secret. This group of people didn't know anything about this, yet they were still strutting around. It was truly ridiculous. A disciple taught by a nascent soul stage venerable must be extraordinary. Then I will have a good experience. Chapter 85. Every day, all kinds of self-cultivators would come to the school. Many of them came from different schools. This was the relay station of the world of self-cultivators, and a lot of important information would come from here. Most people already knew that Ching Song School and Jihua School were going to annex other schools. Many disciples were very angry about this, but it was useless. At this moment, many people gathered at the school's gate. They complained that they couldn't fly directly into the school, and they were even more dissatisfied that they were blocked at the gate. Isn't Ching Song School going too far? You want to disturb the rest of us because of the death of one disciple? Many people were extremely angry because their school was going to be destroyed. They all accused Sun Yin of being too overbearing, but what could they do? The Pine Tree Taoist cultivation was there for all to see. The disciples of the Pine Tree sect were more talented than the disciples of the other sections. The people of the other sects could only talk about it. Their own master had already accepted his fate, so what could they as disciples do? Shut up. None of you can get away with Xiaohu's death. You won't be able to live peacefully until the murderer is found. These are the words of our patriarch, Verdant Pine. Do you have any objections? Sun Yin angrily rebuked. The words of patriarch Verdant Pine? Soon, the crowd quieted down. Xiaohu was the disciple that patriarch Verdant Pine valued the most. He didn't expect that Xiaohu would die in an accident. Naturally, patriarch Verdant Pine was full of anger. Who would dare to refute his words? In a world of self-cultivators, the words of the powerful were the truth, and the words of the weak were a joke. Huh, your patriarch Verdant Pine is a nascent soul venerable. How come he can't even find a murderer? Your nascent soul venerable's ability is really amazing. Tu Panshan of Jiahua School laughed presumptuously. Others might be afraid of Qing Song School, but Jiahua disciples were not. Ever since immortal Jiahua and Qing Song Taoist wanted to establish two schools to divide the forces of Maoyuan Mountain Range, they stood on opposite sides, and neither side was willing to submit to the other. Now, the disciples of Qing Song School wanted to ride on the heads of Jiahua School. How could they agree? How dare you? How dare you insult the patriarch? Take these people down. Sun Yin waved his hand, and 5 to 6 Foundation establishment disciples rushed out of the school. Without saying a word, flying swords of all shapes and sizes smashed towards the Jiahua School disciples. Do you really think we're afraid of you? Tu Panshan roared. The 4 disciples of Jiahua School went up against the disciples of Qing Song School at the same time. The disciples of the two sects immediately started fighting at the entrance of the academy. For a moment, saber light and sword shadows flashed, sword chi crisscrossed, and shadows of people flew in an endless stream. As for you, I'll make an example out of you today. The sword in Sun Yin's hand slashed horizontally at Muyu. Naturally, he knew Muyu. Everyone knew that Muyu had defeated Xiaohu, but the Qing Song School's disciples were arrogant and arrogant. They thought highly of themselves and thought that Muyu had won by trickery. Sun Yin had made up his mind to teach Muyu a lesson and get back at him for the humiliation he had suffered that day. Clang! Muyu was fearless. The shadow clone sword slashed through the air, and a violent surge of spiritual energy pushed Sun Yin back. He had been feeling depressed for so many days. His master's whereabouts were unknown, and he was burning with anxiety. At this moment, he was being humiliated by Sun Yin. His emotions had accumulated to the extreme, and he suddenly wanted to vent them, killing the chicken to warn the monkey. The spiritual energy around Muyu's body began to become violent, and the shadow, sword light, soared into the sky. Then, the sharp sword chi poured down in torrents. It was as if thunder had descended from the sky, and no one could stop it. Sun Yin was shocked. He didn't expect Muyu to have such a terrifying sword technique. His cultivation was only at the 3rd layer of Foundation establishment. Because Patriarch Evergreen Pine had stepped into the nascent soul stage, the Qing Song School's disciples had become complacent. They thought that the disciples of other sects couldn't withstand a single blow, let alone the disciples of the Luochen sect. Looking at the monstrous sword chi, he suddenly realized that it wasn't a coincidence that Xiaohu lost to this person. How could this young man be so easy to bully? However, he was already riding a tiger and couldn't back down, so he couldn't just admit defeat. His fingers moved, and he used the pine-chasing wind chant. The boundless aura of an ancient pine wrapped around the sword chi and collided with Muyu's sword. The two sword chis collided. However, he had underestimated Muyu's ability. When Muyu used the shadow clone sword to heavily injure Xiaohu, it wasn't because of luck, but because of the sword in his hand. The sword in Little Tiger's hand was the Pine Tree Taoist Pine Tree Sword, which had once been peerless in this world. However, it was still no match for Muyu. Sun Yin's sword was only an ordinary sword. How could he defeat Muyu? The sword chi of the pine, chasing wind chant, was like rotten wood as it directly collapsed in the air. The boundless sword chi was broken and turned into nothingness. Muyu's sword chi destroyed the pine, sword chi. His body was as fast as lightning as he used the falling dust steps and arrived in front of Sun Yin in 2 steps. Sun Yin used his flying sword to block in front of his chest in an attempt to block Muyu's foot. However, Muyu's strength was like 1,000 caddies as it broke Sun Yin's flying sword. He heavily stepped on Sun Yin's chest and fiercely stomped Sun Yin to the ground. With a boom, the ground exploded. Sun Yin was actually stomped into the ground by Muyu. You dare? Sun Yin spat out a mouthful of blood. The sword in his hand had already been broken in two and fell to the side. Before killing a chicken to warn the monkey, you must remember to sharpen your blade. Otherwise, the one who will be killed will be you. Muyu increased his strength, and Sun In spat out another mouthful of blood. He could no longer speak, and could only glare at Muyu with eyes full of hatred. He wanted nothing more than to tear Muyu into pieces. And you guys, Muyu's body exploded as the shadow sword split into four. The sword light was boundless, and its momentum was like a rainbow as it poured into the fighting disciples of the two schools. It exploded in the middle of the fighting disciples of the Jihua school and Qingsong school. The dazzling sword light flickered, making people not dare to look directly at it. The violent sword chi whizzed about, and waves of sword shadows shot out in all directions, ruthlessly landing on each disciple's body. They were sent flying and fell to the ground, creating a large pile of dust that filled the air. The disciples of the Jihua school and Qingsong school were still arrogant just a moment ago. But in the blink of an eye, they were all moaning on the ground like dead dogs, battered and exhausted. Muyu stood in the middle of these people. The shadow sword shot back from all directions and reformed into one sword, which was held in Muyu's hand. Silence. Everyone stared in disbelief at the only standing youth in the field. His expression was cold as he stood proudly. The genius disciple of the Falling Dust sect had single-handedly defeated the disciples of the Qingsong school and Jihua school. He only used one move to take down the arrogant disciples of the two schools. The entire process was clean and swift, and it all happened in the blink of an eye. This Falling Dust sect disciple actually had such courage. The onlookers' mouths were agape as they stared at Muyu in shock. The Falling Dust sect, which had always been at the bottom of the rankings, actually had such a monster. Not only did he show off his abilities in the competition and defeat Xiao, who was the talk of the town, he even took care of the disciples of the Jihua school and Qingsong school like a storm. Muyu's actions were undoubtedly a slap to the faces of the disciples of the Jihua school and Qingsong school. They were beaten like stray dogs, unable to retaliate at all. So what if a nascent soul supremacy appeared in the Qingsong school and Jihua school? Would the cultivation of their disciples improve by leaps and bounds because of the appearance of a nascent soul supremacy? Hiding the mountain and not revealing the water, shocking the world with a single brilliant feat, could this be the true face of the Falling Dust sect? A fox assuming the majesty of a tiger. The one who attained the true body of a nascent soul is only your ancestor. Why do you have to be so arrogant? Do you really think that just because the cultivation world left the Qingsong school and Jihua school, it wouldn't change? Muyu coldly scanned the surroundings. Looking at the people who had fallen to the ground and were screaming in pain, he finally swept away the anger in his heart. He knew that he had taught the Qingsong school and Jihua school a lesson, so he was afraid that the people of these two sects wouldn't let him go. But so what? They were still so arrogant when their skills were inferior. It was only natural that they would be taught a lesson. Muyu patted the dust off his body and strode into the school under the strange gazes of the crowd. This kid is really extraordinary. He's right. Unfortunately, the Falling Dust sect won't be able to escape the establishment of the Qingsong Alliance and Jihua Alliance. Who cares? The disciples of the Qingsong school and Jihua school have always been arrogant. He helped us vent our anger. How satisfying. Most of the surrounding self-cultivators knew that their sects were about to be destroyed. Many of them knew that even if they joined the Qingsong Alliance or Jihua Alliance, their status couldn't be compared to the original Qingsong and Jihua Alliance disciples. They were afraid that they would only be humiliated and ridiculed after entering the school. With their talent, it was impossible for them to truly become a disciple of the Qingsong school or Jihua school. Under such oppressive circumstances, Muyu stood up and taught the disciples of the Qingsong school and Jihua school a lesson. This was very satisfying for many people. Muyu was right. Only the Qingsong Taoist and Jihua Taoist had reached the nascent soul stage. What were these disciples worth? Nighttime. Muyu was lying on the bed in his room. The Falling Dust sect was too poor. There was only one room in the courtyard. Although it was small, it was clean. He knew that the people of the Jiahua school and Qing Song school would block his door tomorrow and cause trouble for him. After all, he didn't go easy on them today. However, he didn't want to suppress himself anymore. Master said to do what he liked, so he should do what he should do. Because of what happened to his master, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He was very depressed. Only today did he feel like he was himself again. Master, I always remember every word you said. But where are you now? Muyu looked at the ceiling and fell in a deep thought. Master had always stood aloof from worldly affairs. He always had a smile on his face and taught them all kinds of principles so that they could learn how to deal with things. Why would someone want to harm such a benevolent old man? Everyone had their own past. Master also had one. His past was Jianing and Qinfeng. However, what did Jianing and Qinfeng mean to the people of the three continents? Why was the young man in red looking for Jianing and Qinfeng? He spent a lot of effort to help the Qingsong Taoist break through to the nascent soul stage and broke the balance of the cultivation world in the Mayan mountain range. Was all of this really just to find Jianing and Qinfeng? But now, there was another mysterious person standing behind perfected Jiahua. He was supporting perfected Jiahua to fight against the Qingsong Taoist. The original order of the cultivation world in the Mayan mountain range had been completely disrupted. What was the point of finding Jianing and Qinfeng? Could it be that the mysterious person behind the young man in red and perfected Jiahua was certain that Jianing and Qinfeng were hiding in one of the sects and wanted to merge with other sects to find Jianing and Qinfeng faster? Muyu turned over. He was in a terrible mood. He knew that in the game between the Qingsong school and Jiahua school, the falling dust sect couldn't be spared. Did Master already know that things would develop like this? Was that why he chose to disappear? Today, the disciples of Jiahua and Qingsong Taoists were like foxes assuming the majesty of a tiger. They were arrogant and bossy, ordering the cultivators of other sects around as if they were extraordinary. How would they feel if they knew that the grandmaster they revered was just a puppet in someone else's hands? Muyu suddenly smiled mischievously. He really hoped that everyone would see the Qingsong Taoist kneeling in front of the young man in red. It would be best if it was exposed that perfected Jiahua was kneeling at the feet of another mysterious person. At that time, many people would be so shocked that their jaws would drop. He really wanted to see if those arrogant disciples of the Qingsong school and Jiahua school would continue to be arrogant. In the dead of night, those who couldn't sleep had their own reasons. However, everyone knew that no one could escape the confrontation between the Qingsong school and Jiahua school. Chapter 86. After daybreak, the school was completely sealed off again. No one could go out, and no one could enter. Yesterday, Xiaohu's death was not over yet, and today, another person was killed. No one had expected that another person would die in the school last night. This time, it was not a disciple from Qingsong school who was killed, but 4 disciples from Jiahua school, led by 2 Panshan. They were killed at the same time. Their throats were slit, and their hearts disappeared in the same way as Xiaohu's death. The same method of killing was used on the disciples of Qingsong school and Jiahua school. One could imagine the huge sensation caused by this incident. Both immortal Jiahua and Qingsong Taoists were nascent soul cultivators. In the cultivation world, their prestige was like the sun at noon. Who in the world dared to provoke them? However, the disciples of these 2 schools had died in such a bloody manner. Furthermore, the school was the place with the most cultivators. The murder did not leave any clues. Someone dared to step on the lion's head, but this person did not leave any footprints on ground. How come the disciples of Jiahua school were also killed? Serves them right. Yesterday, 2 Panshan and the others were taught a lesson by Muyu from the Falling Dust sect. They went back to let the gray disciples treat their wounds. I heard that one of the gray disciples did not treat 2 Panshan well and lost an arm. They were injured like that, but they still had the strength to bully the gray disciples. They are really something. Many people gathered in front of the gate of Jiahua School's courtyard and pointed at them, telling each other what they knew about the situation. Now that Song School and Jiahua School wanted to annex the entire cultivation world and divide the world equally, the disciples of Song School and Jiahua School were even more arrogant and despotic. Many cultivators were full of resentment towards the people of Song School and Jiahua School. After hearing the news of their deaths, no one sympathized with them. It was impossible for Mu Yu to not know about such a big incident. He also came to join in the fun. Unfortunately, the information he heard was the same as when Little Tiger was killed. There were no other useful clues. Mu Yu suddenly felt a burst of guilt towards the gray disciple whose arm had been crippled. After all, the injuries of Tu Panshan and the others were caused by him. That gray disciple could be considered an indirect victim. The deaths of Tu Panshan and the others could be considered as retribution, although this retribution was a little too great. People from Jiahua School rushed over after hearing the news. Their reactions were the same as those from Song School. However, the one who was killed in Song School was the famous Little Tiger, while Tu Panshan and the others were not core disciples like Little Tiger. Even so, perfected Jiahua had just attained his nascent soul. How could his dignity be challenged by others? He had to get to the bottom of this. After learning about the friction between the disciples of Jiahua School and Song School yesterday, as well as Little Tiger's death, the disciples of Jiahua School directly went to Song School to denounce them. They believed that Song School suspected that Little Tiger's death was caused by Jiahua School, so they secretly took revenge. Their reasoning was very good. Why did only the disciples of Jiahua School die that night, and not the disciples of Song School? How could the disciples of Song School let it go? They originally suspected that Jiahua School was involved in Little Tiger's death, and they had yet to ask Jiahua School clearly. Instead, they were bitten back. How could the proud disciples of the Pine Tree sect endure this? Suddenly, the two sects were at daggers drawn, and a fight almost broke out again. In fact, people with discerning eyes could understand that Little Tiger's death was probably not caused by Jiahua School, but by someone in the dark who deliberately provoked the conflict between the two sections. Jiahua School and Song School had already planned to swallow up the sects in the Moyun mountain range. With the two sects dominating the mountain range, many sects faced the threat of being swallowed up. How could many cultivators be willing to accept this? It was likely that this matter was deliberately done by a certain cultivator. Whether it was revenge or chaos, as long as the conflict between Song School and Jiahua School began to intensify, other cultivators would be happy to see it. Unfortunately, the disciples of Song School and Jiahua School had blood rushing to their heads. They were shouting at each other and didn't think about who would benefit from this matter. If Bai Liang hadn't appeared in time, perhaps the school would have become the first battlefield between Song School and Jiahua School. Yesterday, Bai Liang himself was in the school. Bai Liang also knew that Mu Yu had taught Jiahua School and Song School a lesson at the school gate. However, after he learned the reason, he didn't go to find Mu Yu to denounce him. Instead, he scolded his junior fellow apprentice not to be too frivolous. This problem was easy to figure out. Song School and Jiahua School wanted to merge with other sects, so naturally, they had to start fighting for disciples with good qualifications to join their respective alliances. Mu Yu had such a terrifying talent. He was much more talented than the local disciples in their sections. If such a person was willing to pledge allegiance, he would definitely be a great help to their sects in the future. This matter was the fault of the disciples of Song School. Bai Liang was also a sensible person. If he really went to denounce Mu Yu, he was afraid that in the future, Mu Yu would directly choose to join Jiahua School. This would be a huge loss for Song School. Bai Liang thought so. However, the disciple who came to deal with this matter from Jiahua School was an idiot. How could he have considered this point? After Reverend Jiahua achieved his nascent soul and nascent soul true body, many of his disciples became arrogant. They only thought about how to show off and intimidate others, but they forgot that if they wanted to win the hearts of the entire cultivation world, the most important thing was to win the hearts of the people. When one sect was the most powerful, no one would dare to say anything if one acted like a tyrant. When there were two sects to choose from, one would choose the other. At that time, one would be alone and helpless. How could one compete with the opponent? Baliang asked his disciples to leave. Without evidence, he would not allow a direct conflict with Jihua School. The people of Jihua School found that Qing Song School did not want to confront them, so they pointed the finger at Muyu. Muyu was pointed out before he could leave. He shrugged and looked calmly at the people of Jihua School. Yesterday, you were the one who dared to injure my disciples and kill them all. The person who came to deal with this matter from Jihua School was a powerful cultivator from the Jindan period. He looked to be in his 50s, and his name was Lu Changyuan. He had a strong cultivation level and an explosive temper. When he heard that his disciples had died tragically and were injured by the disciples of the Luochan sect, he immediately wanted to settle the score with Muyu. Kill them? If I wanted to kill them, I would have done it yesterday. Why would I go through so much trouble? Muyu said calmly. He would not cower just because the other party was a powerful cultivator from the Jindan period. He had seen many powerful cultivators from the Jindan period. His own sect had 3 of them. This old man was nothing. Lu Changyuan was furious when he saw that Muyu did not take him seriously at all. He shouted, "You are just a piece of trash from the Luochan sect. How dare you be so arrogant after killing my Jihua School's disciples? You're courting death." Lu Changyuan waved his hand, and a majestic pressure swept towards Muyu. Muyu's expression changed slightly, but he stepped lightly and dodged the Jindan period's attack by a hair's breadth. In the past, when she was trained by Uncle and on the mountain, Uncle Lin's strength was much higher than this old man's. This old man was only in the first heavenly layer of the Jindan realm. Although Muyu could not beat this old man, it was more than enough to protect herself. Evidence is important when it comes to killing people. You keep saying that I killed your people. Your Jihua School is really impressive. This was not the first time that Muyu had been wrongly accused by someone from the Jihua School. Back when he and Lan Ling went down the mountain, the Jihua School had also forcefully accused him of murder. When Lu Changyuan saw that he had failed to take down Muyu, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. His body flashed, and his hand reached for Muyu's neck. Muyu felt a burst of pressure. This old bastard was serious. The shadow of the sword in his hand surged and slashed at Lu Changyuan's hand. He retreated again. If I say you killed him, then you killed him. When Lu Changyuan saw that he had caught Muyu twice, his old face could no longer hang on. It was already a shameful thing for a gold core stage cultivator to make a move on a Zhuji stage cultivator, but he still failed twice in a row. This was really shameful. Is Jihua School always so unreasonable? The pressure in front of Muyu suddenly dissipated, and Bai Liang's figure appeared in front of him. He lifted his hand and neutralized Lu Changyuan's attack. Bai Liang, we'll settle the matter between your Qing Song School and our Jihua School later. You stopped me from punishing the murderer. Could it be that you were the one who instigated this? Lu Changyuan stopped and said angrily. Bai Liang's strength was higher than his, so he did not want to cause trouble for himself. Bai Liang smiled faintly. This matter hasn't come to a conclusion yet. Your Jihua School doesn't distinguish between right and wrong. I'm really worried about the future of the Jihua Alliance. If the Jihua Alliance has people like you to teach, I really don't know where your Jihua disciples will go to seek redress after being wronged. Lu Changyuan's aggressive manner had alarmed many people, and they came to join in the fun. Bai Liang deliberately raised his voice so that many people could hear him. He exposed the Jihua School's unreasonable behavior in a few words, and many people immediately had a very bad impression of the Jihua School. The 1-month deadline was not up yet, and every school had not made their choice yet. At this moment, the Jihua School was so unreasonable. If they chose to join the Jihua School in the future, they would have no way to redress their grievances if they had to rely on the preferences of the Jihua School disciples when there was a conflict. Bai Liang was indeed a talent. He directly smeared the Jihua School's reputation. In this way, when people chose to join the Qing Song School or the Jihua School in the future, they would definitely prefer the fair and just Qing Song School. The Jihua school has gone too far. Yes, now that the situation is forced, I think it's better to join the Qingsong school. Discussions broke out. Bai Liang dealt with things in an orderly manner, and he was a role model for the younger generation in the cultivation world. In the future, he would definitely be the master of the Qingsong school. Obviously, it was better to choose to join a tolerant school than an unreasonable one. Humph, you're just a disciple of the Luochen school. Our Jihua school doesn't care about you at all. Lu Chuanyuan still didn't realize what stupid thing he had done. He thought that since he was already in the nascent soul stage, he didn't need to consider these things at all. Whoever wanted to join could join, and whoever didn't, he didn't care. It didn't matter. Bai Liang laughed. Our Qingsong school is the opposite of your Jihua school. We welcome everyone to join the Qingsong school. The Qingsong alliance we established doesn't care about status or power. As long as you have the ability, we welcome you at any time. Whether it's the Luochen school or the Qingsong school, you don't have to worry about status in the Qingsong alliance. Little brother Mu Yu, I very much welcome you to join our Qingsong alliance in the future. Bai Liang was undoubtedly a talent. When the Jihua school belittled the Luochen school, he said that he understood the big picture, which undoubtedly won the favor of the cultivators present. Just think about it. The Luochen school was at the bottom of the cultivation world. If Bai Liang could extend an olive branch like this, then what did those sects that were more powerful than the Luochen school have to worry about? The alliance only cared about who had more supporters. As long as the disciples of the Qingsong alliance were powerful, then even if Taoist Master Jihua was in the nascent soul stage, he still wouldn't be able to compete with the Qingsong school. This was because the Qingsong school didn't lack nascent soul cultivators. You even accepted a laughable school like the Luochen school? It seems like your Qingsong school accepts all kinds of trash. Lu Chuanyuan sneered. Shut up, Chuanyuan. A reprimand was accompanied by a shadow landing. Zhu Wenxing had actually arrived. He fiercely glared at Lu Chuanyuan as soon as he arrived, then turned around and bowed to everyone. Everyone, please don't misunderstand. My senior brother Chuanyuan has a bad temper, so please forgive him if he has offended you. Our Jihua alliance only uses talented people, so we will be fair and just in all matters. No matter what school you come from, we will treat you all the same. I believe that little brother Mu Yu didn't kill anyone, so we will definitely get to the bottom of this matter. We won't wrongly accuse little brother Mu Yu. Please forgive us, little brother Mu Yu. Zhu Wenxing revealed a kind smile and spoke sincerely, as if he really meant it. Mu Yu scratched his nose. How did he suddenly turn from a murderer to a little brother? This change in attitude was so fast that Mu Yu almost didn't react in time. Zhu Wenxing wasn't as short-sighted as Lu Chuanyuan. In the cultivation world, he and Bai Liang were the two representatives of the younger generation. Naturally, there was a reason for that. If the current situation wasn't handled well, then perhaps a lot of people would choose to join Qingsong school in a month's time. At that time, how could the Jihua alliance compete with the Qingsong alliance? The onlookers were also in an uproar. Yesterday, Mu Yu was called trash by the disciples of the two schools, but today, he suddenly became a hot steam bun. Whether it was by Liang or Zhu Wenxing, both of them were so polite to Mu Yu, which was rare. Little brother Mu Yu, I know that killing people has nothing to do with you, but if someone dares to wrongly accuse you, don't hesitate to tell me. My Qingsong school will definitely uphold justice for you, Bai Liang said in a cultured and refined manner. Little brother Mu Yu, brother Bai Liang is right. My Jihua school won't wrongly accuse anyone, so don't worry. In the future, I will properly discipline my fellow disciples of Jihua school. Today's incident will never happen again. Lu Chuanyuan originally wanted to say something, but Zhu Wenxing stopped him. Mu Yu naturally knew what they were thinking. The other disciples of Jihua school and Qingsong school were arrogant and short-sighted, but how could these two people be so muddle-headed? Although the Falling Dust sect didn't have many people, regardless of whether it was the Foundation Establishment cultivator Mu Yu or the Jindan period cultivator Qingyan, who had hidden his strength, they had both reached such a cultivation level at such a young age. This sect naturally wasn't as weak as it seemed on the surface. Zhu Wenxing also remembered that the Falling Dust sect also had a girl who was at the 9th layer of foundation establishment. At the same age as Mu Yu, she already had the strength of a 9th layer foundation establishment cultivator. This kind of heaven-defying talent wasn't inferior to Xiao Hu's, not to mention the 2 elders from the Jindam period. The Falling Dust sect didn't have many people, but everyone was worth roping in. The representatives of the 2 great sects simultaneously threw an olive branch to Mu Yu, but unfortunately, Mu Yu didn't appreciate it. Under the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator, the Falling Dust sect naturally couldn't ignore it. Whether it was joining the Jihua Alliance or the Qingsong Alliance, Mu Yu wouldn't truly pledge his loyalty to anyone. What he wanted was to ensure his master's safety. That was all. Then go find the culprit yourselves. I believe that with the ability of the 2 of you, it will be easy for you to catch the murderer. Mu Yu smiled and turned to walk towards her courtyard. Chapter 87. Mu Yu didn't return to the mountain. He had already stayed at the school for 3 days. Because Bai Liang and Zhu Wenxing were guarding the school, the shadow in the dark didn't seem to dare to act rashly. Therefore, no one in the school had been in trouble for the past few days. In fact, Mu Yu also felt that it was strange. The shadow was so fast. Based on the way it killed, it couldn't be human. The shiny claws and the way it dug out the heart were not something a human could do. However, monsters weren't that intelligent. Only a monster could do this. A demon. Mu Yu wasn't sure. Even if a demon evolved into a human, it would more or less retain some characteristics of a monster. People would definitely notice it if it entered the school. Most importantly, it was said that the demon race had gone extinct thousands of years ago. The demons on Mount Fulong hadn't fully evolved. They were just tools under Yumon's control. With their intelligence, it was impossible for them to do such a thing in the school. The shadow seemed to be very familiar with the school. There were so many cultivators, but it didn't kill. Instead, it chose to kill the disciples of Qingsong School and Jihua School. It seemed to be intentional. Bai Liang hadn't made any progress in investigating Xiaohu's death. Zhu Wenxing hadn't found the murderer either. However, both of them were the mainstays of the school. They had more important things to do, so they quickly left. Zhu Wenxing evacuated all the disciples of Jihua School from the school in case of any accidents. Bai Liang left 2 disciples behind to deal with the rest of the school's trivial matters. Mu Yu knew that the shadow wouldn't stop. Perhaps it was waiting for an opportunity. Bai Liang leaving the school and leaving the 2 disciples behind was the best opportunity. Mu Yu planned to go to the Qingsong School's side yard at night to investigate and see if he could find the mysterious shadow. Mu Yu didn't know why he wanted to track down this mysterious person. Logically speaking, this matter had nothing to do with him. He could just stand by and wait to see who wanted to provoke the conflict between Qingsong School and Jihua School. It was just that he happened to be in the same room with the Black Shadow that night, and even fought with the Black Shadow, but he didn't even see what the Black Shadow looked like, which made him a little curious. Now that he wanted to find his master, he didn't know where to start, so he might as well find something to do. At night, Mu Yu found a place where no one was around and hid in the trees. There were many trees in the academy, which provided Mu Yu with a lot of convenience. When he passed by the gate of the Gray Disciples' courtyard, Mu Yu found that there was a person who was obviously a cultivator making things difficult for a Gray Disciple. The disciple in gray was submissive, and his face was full of flattery. I despise Gray Disciples like you the most. It's fine if you don't have the talent for cultivation, but you're so slow even when you're doing something. It was a young man with a pale face. His face was full of arrogance, and his eyes were full of contempt when he looked at the Gray Disciple. That's enough, Junior Brother Lin. Don't always make things difficult for the Gray Disciple. Let's go back quickly. Senior Brother is waiting for us, said another young man with a square face. They were meant to be our servants. Junior Brother Lin kicked the disciple in gray and left with the young man with a square face. Mu Yu sighed in the trees. The Gray Disciples in the academy were always bullied by cultivators. Many cultivators looked down on the Gray Disciples, and this had become a common practice. He really wanted to go out and teach that Junior Brother Lin a lesson, but he thought that he had another purpose in the evening, so he restrained himself. He entered the courtyard of Ching Song School with the help of a tree on the wall of the courtyard and hid in the tree. He had some expectations about this black shadow. Who on earth was this black shadow? Would he show up in the evening? Bai Liang left the academy. This was the best time to assassinate the two Ching Song School disciples. The moonlight was hazy, and the buildings of the academy seemed to be covered with a layer of silver gauze. It was quiet and peaceful, with only a few flickering lights. No one would think that something bloody would happen here. It was getting late, and the night wind was blowing. The lights in the room of the two Ching Song School disciples were still on. They hadn't come out since Mu Yu came. They should be meditating and cultivating in the room, and they didn't even make a sound. Mu Yu had been hiding in the tree for the whole night. The grass on the ground was his eyes. As long as the black shadow showed up, he would have to go through the grass, and Mu Yu would be able to find him. However, this night was peaceful. No one came to make trouble for the two Ching Song School disciples, and the black shadow didn't show up. Mu Yu waited for the whole night, but there was no result, which made him a little disappointed. The moment the sun rose, Bai Liang suddenly opened the door and walked out. He looked a little tired. It seems that the murderer didn't fall into the trap. You guys pack up. We're going back to the mountain, Bai Liang said to the room. Mu Yu was stunned. This guy didn't leave. It turned out that Bai Liang deliberately created the illusion that he had left the academy to lure the snake out of its hole. Even Mu Yu, who had stayed outside for the whole night, didn't notice this. Unfortunately, the black shadow seemed to have seen through Bai Liang's trick. He didn't fall into the trap and didn't show up last night. Mu Yu yawned and left the courtyard of the Ching Song School with the help of the trees. He walked back to his residence. He didn't find anything last night, so he was very sleepy. He needed to make up for it. Many cultivators came and went during the day, so the black shadow wouldn't do anything. Senior brother, have you seen junior brother Lin? Early in the morning, two disciples of unknown sex came out from the front corner side by side. One of the young men asked. Mu Yu saw the young man last night. He had a square face. The junior brother Lin he mentioned was the one who had embarrassed the gray disciple last night. However, that junior brother Lin wasn't with him now. The one with him was a strange man. Nope. Could it be that he went for a stroll somewhere? Did he come back last night? The other man, who was more mature, said, He came back with me last night. I saw him when I got up in the middle of the night to relieve myself. However, I was woken up by a gust of wind in the early morning, so I didn't see him. He was sleeping in the same room as me. What a bother. Where did he go? He knew he had to go back today. The two people were a little angry about junior brother Lin leaving without saying goodbye. They didn't care about Mu Yu and just passed by Mu Yu. However, Mu Yu frowned. The junior brother Lin who bullied the gray disciple last night was missing. Mu Yu suddenly remembered that the black shadow attacked Little Tiger because Little Tiger forced three pretty gray female disciples to sleep with him. At that time, there were four other people in the room besides Mu Yu. Why did the black shadow kill Little Tiger alone and let the three gray disciples go? When the Jihua school disciple died, Mu Yu also went to investigate the situation the next day. He heard that Tu Panshan and the others let the gray disciples heal their wounds. However, one of the gray disciples had an accident and had his arm crippled by Tu Panshan and the others. Then, Tu Panshan and the others were killed. Last night, he saw the pale-faced junior brother Lin make things difficult for the gray disciples for no reason. Then, junior brother Lin disappeared in the morning. Was this all a coincidence, or was someone taking revenge for the gray disciples? Mu Yu felt that he had been blinded by something. He always thought that the black shadow who assassinated the Jihua school and Ching Song school disciples was someone who deliberately provoked the conflict between the two schools. However, he never thought of other possibilities. What if someone couldn't stand the self-cultivators bullying the gray disciples and took revenge for the gray disciples and killed these people? Could this hypothesis be true? It's hard to say. That junior brother Lin didn't have any evidence to prove that he was killed. Mu Yu denied his own guess. Moreover, this guess didn't hold water. No one in the self-cultivator world looked up to the gray disciples. Who would be willing to take revenge for them? Maybe if Deacon Sun was still here, he might protect these gray disciples. However, Deacon Sun was killed by Little Tiger. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, Deacon Sun didn't have the ability to kill self-cultivators. He was just a great disciple with poor talent. It was impossible for him to have the ability to kill people. Could it be that someone who used to be a great disciple encountered an opportunity to become a self-cultivator and came to take revenge on those who bullied the great disciples? Muyu thought of Gu Tian. He was also a great disciple and was lucky enough to be accepted as a disciple by Boyang Daoren. He was a body cultivator, and his strength was much stronger than the self-cultivators of other sections. With his personality, it was possible for him to do these things. However, Gu Tian didn't like to do sneaky things. He was more simple-minded and wouldn't do anything secretly. Therefore, Gu Tian wasn't very suspicious. Anyway, if the Black Shadow was taking revenge for the Grey Disciples, then he must be in the school. Otherwise, how would he know who bullied the Grey Disciples? There were more or less people bullying the Grey Disciples in the school every day. Except for the uproar caused by the deaths of Tu Panshan and Little Tiger, no one from the other sect had heard of anyone being killed or going missing. Wait, killed or gone missing? Muyu patted his head. The school was a station of the self-cultivators in the Moyun mountain range. There were people coming and going every day. Who had time to care about who went missing? Even if someone went missing, they would just think that they had left the school. Except for the people from the same sect who would care about other self-cultivators. If the person who went missing was a disciple from a weaker sect, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. But if it was Little Tiger from Qing Song School and Tu Panshan from Jihua School, it was different. Their deaths would definitely cause a sensation. In other words, there might be people going missing or being killed in the school every day. It was just that no one cared. For example, this missing junior brother Lin. What if he didn't leave the school on his own, but was killed because he bullied the Grey Disciples? His death wouldn't cause a sensation like Little Tiger and Tu Panshan. In other words, was it possible that many self-cultivators in the school often went missing mysteriously, but because of Little Tiger and Tu Panshan's special identities, this matter attracted everyone's attention? Muyu was terrified. Who would do such a thing? Killing self-cultivators? Was it really just to vent the anger of the Grey Disciples? Muyu pulled himself together and prepared to verify his idea. Chapter 88. If Muyu was asked to bully the Grey Disciples, he naturally wouldn't do it. He would feel bad about it. If it was too fake, the other party wouldn't be fooled. Therefore, he planned to secretly pay attention to the self-cultivators who bullied the Grey Disciples. This was more practical. Although most of the self-cultivators looked down on the Grey Disciples, not everyone would deliberately make things difficult for them. Some of the self-cultivators were quite friendly to the Grey Disciples. However, the friendly ones were the minority. The majority of the self-cultivators didn't make things difficult for the Grey Disciples. The rest were the people who bullied the Grey Disciples. This was also Muyu's goal. Muyu observed the entrance of the Grey Disciples' courtyard for the whole day to see if there were any self-cultivators who would deliberately make things difficult for the Grey Disciples. The Grey Disciples' daily job in the academy was to clean up, serve tea, and satisfy the needs of the self-cultivators who passed by. From time to time, self-cultivators would come to the Grey Disciples' courtyard to ask them to do something. Most of them had a cold expression and left after instructing the Grey Disciples to do something. They looked arrogant and didn't want to say anything, but they didn't make things difficult for the Grey Disciples. Muyu waited for a long time, and finally, someone came to find trouble. It was a domineering middle-aged man. His cultivation wasn't high, but his tone was arrogant. His face was sallow, and he looked malnourished. It was unknown which sect he came from. At this moment, he was teaching a Grey Disciple in his 20s a lesson. The Grey Disciple's face was flushed red. It was obvious that he was scolded wrongly. "Young Master Fong, the bone grass you asked me to buy is gone. I searched the entire market, but couldn't find it." The Grey Disciple said softly. He felt so wrong that he was about to cry. Young Master Fong said angrily, "It's not in the market of Qingshou City. Why don't you go to the market of E-City? I really don't understand why every sect has to pay spirit stones to support you. What are you guys doing? You can't even do such a small thing. Useless. The market of E-City is on the mountain. It's so far away from here. I'm only at the first level of chi cultivation and haven't learned how to fly. It'll take me 5 to 6 days to go back and forth. The Grey Disciple said with a sobbing tone. Stop talking nonsense. I'll only wait in the academy for 3 days. If you don't buy the bone grass I want in 3 days, I'll break your legs. There's so many Grey Disciples in the academy. You're just one more. Young Master Fong's foundation establishment stage aura completely pressed down on the Grey Disciple. The Grey Disciple's face turned pale as he retreated to the wall. He looked at young Master Fong in horror and was so scared that he couldn't speak. Muyu frowned as he looked at this young Master Fong. He was a foundation establishment stage cultivator. If he were to personally go to Yi City, it would be a very quick matter. However, he had to order that Grey Disciple around. It was impossible for the Grey Disciple, who was at the first layer of chi refining, to complete this task in 3 days. He would definitely be punished. He also knew about the bone grass. This kind of plant had excellent healing properties and was relatively rare. Normally, it would only grow on the bones of demonic beasts of the 3rd rank and above. Generally, self-cultivators wouldn't dare to step into the habitat of 3rd-rank demonic beasts in the demonic beast forest. This was also the reason why the bone grass was so rare. Even if that Grey Disciple ran to East City, he might not be able to buy it. Young Master Fong left, but the disciple in gray did not relax at all. He stared blankly at young Master Fong's back, a trace of helplessness in his eyes. To serve these self-cultivators, one had to be on tenterhooks all day long. If there was even the slightest mistake, one would be beaten and scolded. He also envied those self-cultivators with profound cultivation who could fly on swords and use spells. When he was 16 years old, he stayed with the hope that he would be lucky enough to enter a certain sect. Unfortunately, things didn't go as he wished. No one took a fancy to his unbearable cultivation talent. Now, it was too late to regret. Deacon Sun said that when you choose to stay, there were only 2 ways to leave the school. One was to be chosen by a sect and become a disciple. The other was to die. The Grey Disciple shook his head and helplessly turned around to enter the courtyard. He wanted to pack his things and see if he could complete this task in 3 days. This young Master Fong really deserves to die, Muyu muttered in his heart. However, on second thought, there were many people like young Master Fong in the world of self-cultivators. Those with high cultivation looked down on those with low cultivation. Could it be that everyone with high cultivation deserved to die? Muyu didn't know how to judge if a person deserved to die. He didn't think too much about it and followed this young Master Fong. This young Master Fong was called Fong Chong. He was a disciple of the Black Ice sect. The Black Ice sect strength was considered above average. Therefore, their disciples were considered talented. Muyu followed Fong Chong to the courtyard of the Black Ice sect. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the courtyard. There were no trees to enter the courtyard. This made Muyu feel helpless. He could only wait in the trees outside. Night fell. Muyu waited outside the Black Ice sect's courtyard for a day. He didn't know if the Black Shadow would cause trouble for Fong Chong at night. He wasn't sure because there might be other self-cultivators bullying the Grey Disciple. Fong Chong wasn't the only one. Who knew if the Black Shadow would do something to Fong Chong? Muyu found a tall tree where he could see the situation inside the Black Ice sect. The light in Fong Chang's room was still on. Muyu kept staring at his room. Just as Muyu was about to give up, the light in Fong Chang's room suddenly went out. Muyu's heart tightened. He didn't know what it meant. Maybe he just wanted to go to bed. But at this moment, the door to Fong Chang's room opened silently. A shadow flashed out. It seemed to be carrying another person. It quickly rushed into the darkness of the courtyard and disappeared. Muyu's eyes widened. He really wanted to see what was going on. However, every sect's courtyard had its own protection array. If he barged in, he would definitely trigger the array. If something happened to Fong Chong and he was seen on the spot, he wouldn't be able to clear his name. He had no choice but to wait until the next day. He went to the Black Ice sect's courtyard to ask about Fong Chong. Indeed, he heard from the Black Ice sect that Fong Chong seemed to have left the school last night. However, this was impossible. Muyu waited outside for a night and didn't see anyone come out of the Black Ice Sect's courtyard. Could it be that someone is really standing up for the Grey Disciples? Muyu thought to himself. Last time, when Xiaohu was killed, he was also present. When he chased after the shadow, it disappeared as soon as he reached the courtyard. This time it was the same. Could it be that there was a secret passage in every courtyard? Muyu couldn't help but smack her lips at this thought. If that person had dug a secret passage in every courtyard of the academy without being discovered, then it would be impossible for him to do so. Digging a secret tunnel was a huge project. Moreover, the people in the school were all cultivators. It was too difficult to hide it from them. However, Muyu still returned to his courtyard and began searching carefully. The falling dust sect courtyard was very small. It didn't take long for Muyu to search his entire courtyard. He didn't find anything unusual. The only way to the outside world was probably a sewer. However, the sewer was very narrow. It was only wide enough for a person's head. A person's shoulders couldn't go through it. Muyu still didn't believe it. He controlled the tenacious root grass and let its roots slowly seep into the sewer. He was surprised to find that the sewer was very wide. It could allow two people to go through at the same time. This meant that if the Black Shadow really relied on the sewer to enter and exit the courtyards, the size of the sewer didn't matter. He just needed to cut open a piece of land and enter the sewer. If he didn't pay close attention, he wouldn't be able to tell from the outside. Muyu's courtyard wasn't cut open. Clearly, the Black Shadow hadn't visited. Muyu leaned on the root grass and landed in the sewer. The sewer was only used to allow rainwater to flow out. Logically speaking, it didn't need to be so big. Muyu stood in the dark sewer. The light from the shadow clone sword illuminated the path ahead. A rotting smell assaulted him, causing him to frown. He walked a few meters along the sewer and found a bumpy passageway beside him. The passageway was scattered with mud. There were strange claw marks on the walls of the passageway, as if some animal had dug them out. Claw marks. Muyu recalled the claw marks and lost hearts on the necks of the Qingsong School and Jihua School disciples. Only these kinds of claw marks could create such wounds. Muyu turned into the passageway. The mud in the passageway was very moist. He had only taken a few steps when he stepped on something with a squeak. With the help of the green light, he saw that it was the skeleton of a rat. The rat hadn't completely rotted. Muyu had only stepped on its head, causing its brain to spill out. This made him feel very uncomfortable, so he hurriedly continued forward. The passageway was very straight. After walking for a while, he returned to the sewer. Muyu saw a light in front of him. He walked over and raised his head to take a look. This should be the sewer of another courtyard. He didn't know what the meaning of these bumpy passageways was, so he continued to walk along the sewer. It was too quiet here. Only the occasional sound of water dripping could be heard. It echoed in the sewer and sounded very scary. Muyu didn't know where he was. Every time there was a light, he would go over to take a look. He would lift his hand to see if he could move the ground around the sewer. However, he didn't succeed several times. After walking for about an hour, a strong rotting smell assailed his nostrils. This rotting smell came so suddenly that Muyu almost threw up the food he had eaten last night. The rotting smell seemed to be mixed with the heavy smell of blood. It was nauseating. He calmed himself down and turned into a passageway. There was a rustling sound in front of him. It sounded like something was grinding its teeth. There was also a creaking sound. Don't scare me. Muyu somewhat despised himself. No matter what, he was still a cultivator. How could he be afraid of this kind of thing? He waved the shadow clone sword forward. As soon as the green light of the shadow clone sword fell, Muyu suddenly saw a pair of swollen white eyes staring straight at him. These were human eyes. Fuck. Chapter 89. It was a middle-aged man that Muyu did not recognize. With the help of the shadow clone sword, he could barely make out his appearance. Looking at his attire, he seemed to be a cultivator. If Muyu did not remember wrongly, he should be a disciple of the space-seizing faction. Last time, during the competition at Qingsong School, he fought against a disciple of the space-seizing faction. This person's death was very miserable. His neck was dripping with blood. Upon closer inspection, one could see deep claw marks. His chest was badly mutilated with a hole. His heart was gone. His death was the same as Xiao Hu and two Panchans. Muyu covered his nose. When he wanted to take a closer look, several rats suddenly drilled out of the man's heart and fled in all directions. One of them even rushed past Muyu's feet. Even though Muyu was a cultivator, he was still very worried when he encountered this kind of thing. Seeing corpses and rats in the eerie sewers was not a happy thing. Muyu forced himself to calm down. He touched his head. Just now, he subconsciously wanted to fly up and hit his head. Even now, it was still aching. This person had been dead for at least a month. Some parts of his body had already started to rot. His stomach was flat. His internal organs had probably been eaten clean by the rats. His eyes were wide open and looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. At least he died outside and had someone to collect his body. You only have the company of rats here. How pitiful. Muyu mourned for a few moments and then continued to walk forward. After walking along the sewers for a while, there would be light shining down. Above him was the entrance to the sewers. He turned into a passageway, and then he saw another corpse. This time, he was much calmer. He recognized this corpse. It was the one he saw the night before. It was the one who scolded the gray disciple and then disappeared. The same way of death. The same way of death. Muyu could already confirm his guess. He estimated that if he walked a few more steps and turned a few more passages, he would be able to find Fong Chang's corpse. Muyu felt a chill run down his spine. There were so many cultivator corpses lying in the ground of this huge academy. These corpses were rotting and becoming food for the rats, but no one noticed. It was really sad. Every day, people came and went in the academy, and there were always people who went missing. Presumably, the fellow disciples of these cultivators would never have dreamed that their missing brothers and sisters would be hiding under the academy. The bottom of the academy seemed to have become a living hell. He walked along the passageway, and within 2 hours, he had already found more than 10 corpses. The degree of decomposition of each corpse was different. He wasn't familiar with the layout of the academy and didn't know which courtyard he was in. He also didn't know which sect these corpses belonged to. These tunnels were newly dug, and there was still soil on the ground. Most of the soil seemed to have been transported out, leaving only a little bit of soil residue. Such a huge project was used to store the corpses. The murderer probably did not want the corpses to pile up in the sewer and cause a blockage. But who was the murderer? Why would they use such a cruel method? Where did their hearts go? Could it be that the demon clan was really the culprit? Did the demon clan kill people at will or with a purpose? That's not right. If I continue to walk like this, I will only see corpses and nothing else. Muyu suddenly thought, how did the Black Shadow know that the Gray Disciples were being humiliated? Unless he was nearby at the time, or the Gray Disciples told him. If he wanted to find the murderer, he should be in the Gray Disciples' courtyard. In other words, maybe one of the Gray Disciples was the murderer. But was this possible? If the Gray Disciples had this kind of ability to kill people, would they still need to hide? He should have shown his ability long ago and joined some sect. He didn't need to be a servant who was ordered around all day. Could it be that he had something to hide? In any case, he had to start investigating from the Gray Disciples' courtyard. When he wanted to go back, Muyu was dumbfounded. This place was connected in all directions, and he didn't know which way to go back. There were actually a lot of courtyards in the academy. They were not only specially prepared for sects, but also for rogue cultivators to rest in. Those courtyards cost spirit stones. Moreover, the Gray Disciples' courtyard was divided into more than a dozen small courtyards. There were also drainage openings on the road. There were at least 100 drainage openings in the entire academy. The academy was so big. We had to turn here and there. How could he know where he turned to? Looks like I can only look one by one. Muyu sighed. Fortunately, he was prepared and brought some root grass down. He walked a few steps to the left and found an exit. He walked over and quietly poked the root grass out to observe the surrounding situation. This was an unfamiliar courtyard. There were a few cultivators chatting in the courtyard. Muyu vaguely heard them talking about the Green Pine Alliance and the Jihua Alliance. The establishment of the Green Pine Alliance and the Jihua Alliance had caused the entire cultivation world to pay attention to them. Muyu heard two of the disciples seem to be arguing about something. After listening carefully, It turned out that they were thinking about whether to join the Green Pine Alliance or the Jihua Alliance. However, Muyu had already confirmed from their words that this courtyard belonged to the secluded peace sect. Muyu knew about the secluded peace sect's courtyard. It was 3 courtyards away from the Qingsong School's courtyard. And because the Qingsong School's position was more honorable, the Grey Disciples had to listen to orders all day long. Therefore, the courtyard of the Qingsong School was right next to the Grey Disciples' courtyard. Muyu followed the route in his memory and finally found the sewers under the Qingsong School. However, when he turned into the sewers, he was shocked. He found 7 or 8 corpses in the sewers under the Qingsong School's courtyard. There is no doubt that these people were the Qingsong School's disciples. 7 or 8 disciples of the Qingsong School had secretly died, and the rest of the people in the Qingsong School were unaware. Presumably, they were busy preparing for the Qingsong Taoist celebration, so these people's disappearance seemed insignificant. This is strange. Why didn't the bodies of Little Tiger and the Jihua School's disciples be moved down when they killed them? Muyu was puzzled. It was understandable that the murderer couldn't move Little Tiger's body in time because of his intervention. However, why didn't the 4 disciples of the Jihua School hide their bodies? When Muyu saw the corpses of the Qingsong School's disciples, he couldn't feel sad. He thought, it's a pity that you're not like Little Tiger. Otherwise, your disappearance would have attracted attention. More or less, these people died because they bullied the Grey Disciples. Among all the sects, the Qingsong School's attitude toward the Grey Disciples was the worst. They were born with an inexplicable sense of superiority and felt that they were superior to others. In fact, compared to other sects, they did have an advantage in terms of talent. If the disciples of the Qingsong School didn't ruthlessly order the Grey Disciples around, they wouldn't be able to set off their noble status. They didn't treat the Grey Disciples as human beings. In the end, they paid the price with their lives and died in a dark place forever. However, the murderer killed them because they bullied the Grey Disciples. It was a bit too much. Muyu turned around the Qingsong School's courtyard and went straight to the Grey Disciples' courtyard. However, at this moment, the sound of heavy breathing suddenly came from the corner. The sound of breathing came so suddenly that Muyu's heart almost skipped a beat. He had goosebumps all over his body. After walking for so long, all he saw in this dark and rancid sewer were dead people. The dead couldn't breathe. The only sound he could hear was the sound of rats and dripping water, as well as his own breathing. However, this sudden voice was clearly audible and somewhat deep, as if something was whispering. This was definitely not a dead person. Was it the mysterious Black Shadow? Muyu's heart began to beat faster. Was the Black Shadow a human or a demon? Could it be that he had been living in this dark place all this while? Then what did he rely on to survive? Did he rely on eating human hearts to survive? Then he was definitely not a human. The light of the shadow sword gradually dimmed. Muyu slowly approached the corner, trying not to make any sound. The sound of breathing came closer and closer. It seemed to be accompanied by some asthma. He thought to himself, does this Black Shadow have asthma? It's not strange to have asthma after breathing in this damn place for so long. Muyu held his breath. Should he rush over and fight with the Black Shadow? Wouldn't that be too rash? It would be awkward if he couldn't win. Who cares? I want to see if you're a human or a ghost. Muyu took a step forward. The shadow sword in his hand shone brightly, illuminating the entire tunnel. There was no one. How is this possible? Muyu looked at the entire passage in surprise. The breathing sound just now clearly came from here. Could it be that there was something wrong with her hearing? He felt his way into the tunnel. The sound of heavy breathing had disappeared. The tunnel was still full of claw marks, and it was a little damp. Under the illumination of the green light, Muyu found a shocking pool of blood. The blood hadn't solidified yet, which meant that it was left here not long ago. Muyu squatted down and carefully examined the pool of blood. It was a little black. He reached out and touched it. It was still warm. It looked like the blood of a human. He also saw a set of tattered clothes. It was so dirty that he didn't know how long it had been since it was washed. Just from the clothes, he couldn't tell which sect the cultivator belonged to. The tunnel became quiet again. Muyu could only hear his own breathing. He found that his breathing had become a little heavier. It was similar to the sound of breathing just now. But that's not right. Why was there a slight difference in the sound of his breathing? Different breathing? No, it was clearly two breathing sounds. Muyu felt a little cold on his neck. It was as if there was a light breath blowing on the back of his neck. That breath came so suddenly, as if it had appeared out of thin air. That heavy breathing sound was right behind him. There was someone behind him. Chapter 90. If you were in the dark without any light, and at this time, a heavy breathing sound suddenly appeared behind you out of nowhere, without any premonition, what would you do? Muyu instinctively jumped up again and hit his head again. He still didn't learn his lesson. But this time, he didn't care about the pain. He rolled forward, and the shadow clone's sword stabbed behind him. Ding! The shadow clone's sword seemed to have hit something hard and bounced off. Muyu only saw a shadow flash by and disappear into the sewers. The shadow was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. He took a deep breath and thought that it was really dangerous just now. If the shadow had attacked him, he would have been doomed. But the shadow seemed to want to avoid him and didn't want to meet him, so it chose to run away. He calmed himself down and got up. With a step, he chased after the shadow. The sewers were too dark. He could only vaguely feel that the shadow was moving like a gust of wind. The shadow was extremely fast. After running for a while, it would turn a corner. It didn't stop at all and directly drifted past. It was the first time Muyu had seen such a skillful drifting technique. The sewers weren't suitable for flying, so Muyu could only run. Fortunately, he had learned the mysterious dust-fall steps. His body was very agile when he turned a corner, so he wasn't left behind by the shadow. But Muyu's dust-fall steps was already at its peak, but he still couldn't catch up to the shadow. The shadow's speed wasn't any slower than Muyu's. The shadow seemed to be very familiar with the terrain here. At least, it was much more familiar than Muyu. The shadow made several sharp turns, trying to shake off Muyu's pursuit. From time to time, it would dodge the light from the ground. However, its speed didn't decrease. So much so that Muyu couldn't see what the shadow looked like even after chasing for a long time. If Muyu didn't have the support of the dustfall steps, he would have lost it long ago. "Stop right there," Muyu shouted. He hoped to call the self-cultivators on the ground to help him block the shadow. Unfortunately, the people on the ground probably wouldn't care about the sewers. In fact, he felt a lingering fear in his heart. The other party's speed was so fast. If he had wanted to launch a sneak attack just now, he would have been injured. The aura of that black shadow was not very stable. It was only at the foundation establishment stage. Even so, Muyu was sure that this guy's strength was far beyond those foundation establishment stage cultivators. Just based on this kind of speed, it was rare to find an opponent among the foundation establishment stage cultivators. After chasing for an unknown period of time, Muyu realized that the drainage channel was getting shorter and shorter. Some of the protruding rocks almost hit his head. The black shadow nimbly dodged to the side and turned into another passage. This passageway was very long. It wasn't like the previous passageway where one could reach the end after walking for a while. In the long and narrow passage, there was only the sound of Muyu's clothes flapping. Just like Muyu, the black shadow did not make any sound under his feet. Muyu had already locked onto the aura of that black shadow. The light of the shadow clone sword was not enough to illuminate that black shadow, but he would not lose it. That black shadow did not have any intention of slowing down. His physical strength was still very strong. If not for the fact that Muyu was often forced by Enshu to run on the mountain roads and train his endurance, he would not have been able to catch up with this guy. One must know that flying was much easier than running. Swish! Muyu's eyes suddenly lit up. The bright light shone on his eyes, causing his eyes to be dazzled. Running from a dark place to a bright place was really uncomfortable. He realized that he had unknowingly exited the passage and arrived at a small hill. Muyu knew about this small hill. It was near Qingshou City. He actually left Qingshou City. That black shadow flashed in the bushes in front of him and disappeared. Muyu did not have time to think as he hurriedly followed. In the spacious area, Muyu directly stepped on the flying sword. He did not need to run anymore, and his speed was much faster. It was currently noon, and the sun was shining brightly. Muyu finally saw what that black shadow looked like. It was really a demonic beast. This demonic beast looked like a wolf. Its entire body was as black as ink, but it had two red tails that left behind after images. Its running speed was very fast. Even if Muyu flew, he could not catch up with it immediately. Isn't this a rank 3 demonic beast, soul-devouring wolf? Muyu looked at the soul-devouring wolf in shock. When Changyan brought them out, he would tell them about the characteristics of many demonic beasts. The soul-devouring wolf was one of them. This type of demonic beast was not common. They usually lived in the center of the demonic beast forest. Their strength was extremely tyrannical, comparable to the cultivators of the Jindan period. Ordinary Foundation establishment stage cultivators were not their opponents. The soul-devouring wolf was ferocious. It only ate the heart of its prey and drank its blood. It would not touch the other parts of its prey. It was a bit extravagant and wasteful. However, this was in line with the characteristics of the dead cultivators in the school. But the soul-devouring wolf did not have intelligence. Even if it had the cultivation of the Jindan period, it would not be as smart as the humans of the Jindan period. Why would this soul-devouring wolf appear in the school of Qingshou City? Why would it attack those cultivators? Muyu did not think much as he continued to chase after the soul-devouring wolf. Qingyan said that the soul-devouring wolf would kill its prey when it saw it. It was very cruel. However, it clearly had the chance to kill him, but did not do so. Why was that? After chasing for 2 hours, the soul-devouring wolf had already rushed into the forest. This forest was the demonic beast forest that Muyu had passed through in the past. There were demonic beasts everywhere. The deeper one went, the stronger the demonic beasts were. Ordinary cultivators did not dare to go too deep. Muyu was obviously not an ordinary cultivator. Although his cultivation was only at the foundation establishment stage, he had the ability to control wood. The forest was the most advantageous battlefield for him. Once the soul-devouring wolf entered the forest, it would not be able to escape from Muyu's palm. Xiao! Muyu blended into the trees and arrived at the side of the soul-devouring wolf in a short while. The branches of the trees wrapped around the soul-devouring wolf. However, the soul-devouring wolf reacted quickly. It dodged the branches controlled by Muyu and continued to run forward. I really don't believe that you can outrun me in the forest. Muyu rolled up the dew grass on the ground and firmly wrapped around the soul-devouring wolf's 4 limbs. However, the soul-devouring wolf's strength was too great. It was only tripped once before it tore off the dew grass and escaped. The branches in front swept over once again. The soul-devouring wolf leaped high into the air. Its front claws emitted a bright light. All the branches in front of its sharp claws were cut into pieces like tofu. There was no mistake. These cold claws were the sharp claws that Muyu saw that night. The moment the soul-devouring wolf attacked, its body was slightly blocked. Muyu seized the opportunity and raised his shadow clone sword. A majestic sword energy ruthlessly chopped at the soul-devouring wolf's body, causing it to fall to the ground. A whoa! The soul-devouring wolf cried out in pain. Scarlet blood flowed out of its back. The wound was a ghastly sight. However, its body was still swift. It flipped over and continued to run into the depths of the forest. Muyu originally didn't want to hurt this soul-devouring wolf because the soul-devouring wolf didn't want to kill him in the sewers. However, he had no choice but to make a move. He originally thought that the soul-devouring wolf was a rank 3 monster. Its strength was equivalent to a Jindan period cultivator. It was impossible for it to be hurt by his foundation establishment stage strength. However, this soul-devouring wolf's aura didn't seem like a pure beast's aura. It lacked a wild nature and didn't have the imposing manner of the Jindan period. Other than running away, it didn't even have the thought of fighting with Muyu. The soul-devouring wolf's figure suddenly disappeared. A very deep cave appeared in front of him, and it drilled into the cave. Muyu stopped in front of the cave. His previous experience taught him that he shouldn't enter carelessly. It was very unsafe without any plants. Furthermore, the soul-devouring wolf was a rank 3 monster. If it attacked, Muyu wouldn't have any room to fight back in the cave. He walked to the side of a ponytail pine tree. The branches of the tree moved and extended into the cave. Muyu's figure had already disappeared into the trees. The deeper he went into the cave, the more spacious it became. Moreover, there were some strange stones on the walls of the cave that illuminated the entire cave, making it look very bright. The cave quickly became wide and large. There were some grass clippings around it. Then, Muyu saw a shadow at the end. What's going on? Did he walk around? What shocked Muyu was that this shadow wasn't the soul-devouring wolf that Muyu saw. It was a person. How is this possible? Muyu remembered that it was the soul-devouring wolf that ran in. He glanced around the cave. There were no other exits. However, the soul-devouring wolf was gone. In its place was a thin and weak human. This human wasn't wearing any clothes. He was lying on his side and curled up. There was a scarlet scar on his back. It was left by Muyu's sword chi. Is this a monster? A thought appeared in Muyu's mind. Only the monster could transform between a human and a monster. He had already encountered a monster when he was at Mount Fulong, so he was very cautious this time. However, it was impossible for a monster to completely transform into a human. They would more or less leave behind some characteristics of a monster. Muyu thought that if he went around, he might be able to see the face of a soul-devouring wolf. The tree branches rolled into the cave and stuck to the wall. Muyu crawled out of the tree and stood on a pile of grass clippings. There were some dirty cloth strips around the grass clippings. It looked like they had been torn to shreds by something. There was dried blood and some rocks on the ground. He blocked the shadow clone sword in front of his chest and slowly approached the monster. As long as this person made any strange movements, he would definitely not hesitate to attack. Can you cough, cough? Can you give me a piece of clothing? The monster didn't turn around and spoke very weakly. His voice seemed to be weather-beaten, but it was like a clap of thunder in Muyu's ears. Although the monster could speak human language, their voices were different from humans. The guy in front of him didn't have a monster's voice, but a human's. Chapter 91. Deacon Sun. Muyu exclaimed. Muyu could still vaguely remember Deacon Sun's voice. Back in the academy, it was Deacon Sun who defended Muyu in front of Little Tiger. Because of this, Little Tiger held a grudge against Deacon Sun and eventually forced him into the demonic beast forest. With his chi refining stage cultivation, it was impossible for him to survive in the demonic beast forest. This was what Little Tiger had told him. But why was Deacon Sun here? So you know me. Cough, cough. Give me a robe. Deacon Sun seemed to be seriously ill as he kept gasping for breath. The gasping sound was exactly the same as what Muyu had heard in the sewer. Muyu quickly took out a robe from his universe in the sleeve and put it on Deacon Sun. Deacon Sun smiled bitterly and leaned against the wall. He looked at Muyu and said, "You look familiar. Which sect are you from?" Muyu was extremely shocked. He didn't expect to see Deacon Sun here. At this moment, Deacon Sun's white hair and beard were all bunched up. There were even some bloodstains on his face. His face was very haggard, as if he had been ill for a long time. "Deacon Sun, I'm Muyu. We've met before in the academy." Muyu squatted down and carefully touched Deacon Sun's forehead. Deacon Sun's body was very hot. He seemed to be running a high fever. Deacon Sun smiled miserably, revealing his yellow teeth. "I don't know you. I've seen so many cultivators. How can I remember everyone?" Muyu was speechless. He didn't know how to explain. Deacon Sun had seen almost all the disciples of all the sections. It could be said that every disciple would use the spirit testing stone in front of Deacon Sun before stepping into the cultivation world. Deacon Sun would then guide them on where to stand. Muyu was one of them. 2 years ago, he had only spoken to Deacon Sun twice before leaving the academy with Feng Haochen. It was normal for Deacon Sun to not remember Muyu. "I have some impression of you. You seem to be a disciple of the Falling Dust sect. The Falling Dust sect has never accepted a disciple from the academy. You seem to be the first one, Deacon Sun said with a frown. Muyu nodded with all his might as a sense of guilt welled up in his heart. It was all because of him that little tiger bore a grudge against him and almost caused him to lose his life. Fortunately, he managed to survive the calamity and kept his life. If there was anything that could be made up for, Muyu would do it without hesitation. Why are you chasing me? Are you here to kill me? Deacon Sun asked while gasping for breath. I thought you were the soul-devouring wolf that killed people. Wait, are you that wolf? Muyu's eyes widened. How is this possible? How could this person be the soul-devouring wolf? Deacon Sun's eyes flickered with a cold glint. Those people deserve to die. Muyu fell silent. He didn't know whether those people deserved to die or not. Perhaps the dead cultivators had their reasons to be hateful. However, he still felt that this was a bit too much. But all of this confused him. How could that soul-devouring wolf be Deacon Sun? Deacon Sun was alone. He was killed by Little Tiger. But why was he here now? You didn't come to kill me. I didn't sense any killing intent from you. Deacon Sun looked at Muyu. Muyu nodded. What's your relationship with that soul-devouring wolf? This question caused Deacon Sun's eyes to reveal a trace of pain. He said with some resentment, that bastard from Chingsong School tricked me into coming to this demonic beast forest and attracted a group of demonic beasts. He was the one who caused me to become like this. Cough, cough. But I finally got my revenge. That's one thing off my mind. Muyu knew that Deacon Sun was referring to Little Tiger. Little Tiger was already dead. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that he would die in the hands of a soul-devouring wolf. Furthermore, this soul-devouring wolf was closely related to Deacon Sun. Muyu placed his hand on Deacon Sun's back and transferred his spiritual energy into Deacon Sun's body. Deacon Sun's body was in a terrible condition. All of his bones seemed to be worn out as if they were being squeezed by something. His meridians were also severely damaged. His internal organs were squeezed together. Muyu really didn't know how he had been able to hold on until now. Why are you healing me? Since you know me, you should also know that I'm just a gray disciple, right? Deacon Sun's face slowly regained some color. He looked at Muyu with some surprise. You might have forgotten, but I was also a gray disciple back then. When I was humiliated by Little Tiger, you were on my side. Therefore, I didn't look down on any gray disciple. Moreover, I also treat you as an elder, Muyu said softly. Deacon Sun was slightly stunned. He didn't think that there would be someone who respected him so much. Generally, cultivators from sects wouldn't be so polite to gray disciples. All of the cultivators from sects would speak in a high and mighty tone in front of gray disciples. It's rare for you to be so considerate. You're quite smart. So many people didn't discover the missing people of the academy, but you did. Muyu sighed and said, those people were killed by you, right? Can you tell me what your relationship with the soul-devouring wolf is? I'm that soul-devouring wolf. Deacon Sun laughed at himself. Muyu had already mentally prepared himself. However, he still found it hard to accept this fact. How could a person be a soul-devouring wolf? Unless the soul-devouring wolf was from the demon clan. However, Deacon Sun didn't seem to be from the demon clan. He didn't have the characteristics of soul-devouring wolf from head to toe. After I was abandoned in this forest, I was attacked by demon beasts. However, I was lucky enough to survive. A soul-devouring wolf and an indigo lion bull probably fought over me, their food. The soul-devouring wolf won, but it was on the verge of death. It ignored me and hid in this cave. I crawled in, killed the soul-devouring wolf, and then swallowed its demon spirit. Deacon Sun spoke casually. However, Muyu could imagine the desperate scene. 2 rank, 3 demon beasts fought, and Deacon Sun was only at the chi refinement stage. He could only wait for death. However, there was always a way out. He actually found a chance to survive and swallowed the soul-devouring wolf's demon spirit. The soul-devouring wolf's demon spirit wasn't something I could withstand. Its power was too overbearing. At that time, I felt like my entire body was about to explode. There was a strange fruit in this cave. I didn't know what it was. I only knew that I wanted to quench my thirst, so I ate the fruit. After that, I lost consciousness. Deacon Sun continued. When I woke up, I discovered that I had turned into a wolf. That feeling was too terrifying. I wanted to kill. I wanted to eat something. I lost my mind and rushed out. I don't know how many demon beasts I killed. When I regained my senses, I was here again, and I turned back into a human. Muyu was speechless. He had heard from Qingyan that a soul-devouring flower would grow in the soul-devouring wolf's cave. When the soul-devouring flower bore fruit, the soul-devouring wolf would eat the soul-devouring fruit. It would grow a second tail, and its cultivation would skyrocket. Ordinary rank 3 demon beasts were simply no match for it. Deacon Sun had unintentionally devoured the soul-devouring wolf's demon spirit and ate the soul-devouring fruit. This kind of power wasn't something a human could withstand. Perhaps this was the reason for his mutation. However, this mutation was very rare. Muyu had never heard of a human being able to turn into a demon beast. Deacon Sun's face revealed a trace of pain. He didn't know why he had turned into a half-human, half-beast. In order to survive, he had to hunt demon beasts. The feeling of killing was very terrifying, and it almost made him lose his mind as a human. Fortunately, his willpower was relatively strong, and he was always able to restrain himself in time. That was a year ago. Now, I discovered that I can freely control my human form and soul-devouring wolf form. I know what my food is. I need the hearts of demon beasts, and I only eat hearts. I fought in this forest for a few months. Finally, one day, I met a cultivator. That cultivator used to torture gray disciples like me in every possible way. I couldn't control myself, so I killed him. That was the first time I tasted a human heart. So you couldn't control yourself, and went to the academy to hunt those cultivators who bullied the gray disciples. Muyu asked in a daze. That's right. I like human hearts, but I still have reason. I know that I can't casually kill people. Every time I saw those high and mighty cultivators casually beating up the gray disciples, I always felt angry. I always felt that a place like the academy shouldn't exist in this world. I know everything about the academy. I stayed there my whole life, and I know every inch of the land there like the back of my hand. I know the structure of the academy, and I also know how to enter the academy without anyone noticing. You also saw those tunnels I dug. So, I decided to start looking for the hearts of cultivators as my food. Deacon Sun's face revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Then how do you know who is bullying the gray disciples? You don't dare to appear outside the academy every day, do you? Muyu felt that Deacon Sun's way of doing things was very extreme. Muyu had never liked killing people. However, it was also a fact that the gray disciples' lives were regarded as worthless by cultivators. Gray disciples were often injured by cultivators. Many sects' cultivators were extremely excessive in this regard. He didn't know which side he should stand on. I've been managing the academy for so many years. Don't tell me that I don't trust any of the gray disciples. Every day, I let them throw the names of the cultivators who bullied the gray disciples into the sewers. Every night, I would enter the courtyard, knock them out with drugs, drag them into the sewers, kill them, and eat their hearts. With my speed, it was more than enough to deal with those building foundation stage disciples. Deacon Sun smiled, revealing his mouth full of yellow teeth. There was actually a trace of ferocity in it. Then why did you kill Xiaohu and the Jiuhua school's disciples directly instead of dragging them into the sewers? Them? Humph. They're usually the most arrogant, and they punish us, the gray disciples, the most ruthless. I simply let the world know how they died. This way, I can vent my anger, especially people like Xiaohu. His death can be said to be a heavy slap to the Qingsong school's face. Deacon Sun laughed. After being bullied for so long, he suddenly found that one day he had the ability to fight back. This kind of feeling was very strange. Muyu felt a chill in his heart. It seemed that Deacon Sun was no longer the meek old man he used to be. Now, he had become somewhat ruthless. In his eyes, the lives of those people were worthless. He only wanted to take revenge on those cultivators who had once looked down on him. Why didn't you kill me when you were in the sewers? Why did you tell me these things? Deacon Sun shook his head and said, I don't want to kill the innocent. You didn't bully the gray disciples, so I can't kill you. Besides, someone told me that you taught the disciples of the Qing Song School and the Jiuhua School a lesson the day before yesterday. How could I kill you? He actually paid attention to principles when doing things. Muyu stood up. You said that you don't want to kill the innocent, but you have already killed the innocent. Although those people were abominable, there was no reason for them to die. You shouldn't take their lives so easily. You killed Xiaohu. With the Qingsong Taoist's nascent soul stage cultivation, do you think he can't find out? Qingsong Taoist? Humph. Even in his dreams, he wouldn't think that I would kill people underground, would he? Deacon Sun said disdainfully. Muyu sighed. It's not that beautiful. I just checked your body. Your body is very bad. I'm afraid you'll suffer a lot when you transform into a wolf and a human, right? Your muscles, bones, and internal organs are all deformed. How can you bear this kind of pain? After you transform back into a human, you have no strength at all. If you go on like this, what will you do if you fail one day? Deacon Sun clenched his teeth. I know I'm dying. I'm afraid that if I transform a few more times, I'll die of exhaustion. My body is too weak to bear the power of the soul-devouring wolf. But as long as I'm still alive, I'll kill a cultivator who bullied the Grey Disciples. I only hope that the Grey Disciples can be treated better and not be ordered around like dogs all day long. After being a Grey Disciple for a lifetime, he knew that the life of a Grey Disciple was not for a human to live. After he obtained the power of the soul-devouring wolf, he wanted to take revenge. He wanted to do something within his power to improve the situation of the Grey Disciples. This was Deacon Sun's most straightforward method. Deacon Sun wasn't the Qing Song Taoist. He didn't have the power to change the current situation of the Grey Disciples. He could only rely on himself. Muyu didn't feel good about the miserable state of the Grey Disciples. However, he also found it hard to accept Deacon Sun's extreme method. Muyu also thought that a place like the school shouldn't exist. But how much could Deacon Sun change by doing this? You knew that I would stop you, right? Muyu was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. Deacon Sun smiled. Of course you can. You can kill me now. That would be a kind of relief. I worked as a servant in the school and dreamed of becoming an immortal cultivator all my life. But I ended up like this. This is worse than death. If I don't eat the heart, I will lose my mind. I can't live like a normal person. I gave my whole life to the school. Before I leave, I have to leave something behind. Deacon Sun, do you still remember what a child said to you? If one day he has the power, he will definitely come back and take you away from the school. I'm that child. I don't want you to leave the school by dying. I hope you can come with me to the Falling Dust sect. I will definitely find a way to cure you. I will make you a real cultivator. A decent cultivator identity. Isn't that what you want? Muyu sat down again and looked at Deacon Sun earnestly. Deacon Sun was startled. All his life, he had hoped to gain the favor of some sect elder. Whether it was becoming an attendant or a servant, at least he would have the identity of a cultivator. He wouldn't have to suffer the wrath of everyone in the school. However, no one had taken a fancy to his aptitude. Many times, he had wondered why he had spent his whole life pursuing the immortal cultivation dream. Muyu's words moved him a little, but he still shook his head. No, I know my time is coming. I don't want anything now. I just want to kill a few people. I want to vent all the resentment in my life. That will be enough. Deacon Sun laughed bitterly. He was so miserable, like a candle flickering in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. However, he still hoped that he could change something for the Grey Disciples. Chapter 92. When Muyu stood up, the stones on the surrounding walls suddenly emitted a strange light that shone on his body. This light made Muyu feel as if he was immersed in mucus. Immediately after, he found that he couldn't move at all. It was difficult for him to even circulate the spiritual energy in his body. Muyu was shocked. There was a terrifying force that was forcefully suppressing him, causing his spiritual energy to be unable to circulate. He felt that it was extremely strenuous for him to even lift his arm. He felt as if he was carrying a heavy weight on his back. Don't struggle. With your current foundation establishment stage cultivation, it is impossible for you to break free. Deacon Sun supported himself against the wall and tried to stand up. However, he failed twice. His body was too weak, and he had just been injured by Muyu. His situation wasn't optimistic at all. He gasped for breath. After a long time, he said, "This cave of the soul-devouring wolf is very precious. The shiny stones on the surrounding walls are not simple. If I'm not wrong, these are the legendary purple gold spirit stones. The spiritual energy contained within them is thousands of times more than ordinary spirit stones." Purple gold spirit stones? Muyu sucked in a breath of cold air. Naturally, he had heard of the purple gold spirit stones. This kind of thing was incomparably precious. One purple gold spirit stone was equivalent to tens of thousands of ordinary spirit stones. The spiritual energy contained within was extremely boundless. It had a huge effect on increasing a cultivator's cultivation speed. It was a treasure that many people yearned for even in their dreams. This kind of thing was extremely rare. If one appeared in the cultivation world, it would be fought over by tens of thousands of people. However, there were so many of them here. It was unknown how many years they had been buried. This was a huge fortune. If other people in the cultivation world were to find out about this, it would definitely cause a reign of terror. Even the Qingsong Taoist and Daoist Jiuhua wouldn't be able to resist fighting over it. Many people think that I am just the head of a servant. However, they don't know that I am obsessed with cultivation. I have thoroughly researched many things in the cultivation world. I also have a certain level of attainment in the research of array formations. Even the array formations in the various courtyards of the academy were designed by me. It is not difficult for me to set up an array formation. No matter what kind of array formation it is, it uses spirit stones as the foundation. I can use these purple gold spirit stones to trap you. I once tried to use these purple gold spirit stones to set up a spirit gathering formation, gathering all the spirit chi in the area where you were standing. Unfortunately, my body is too old and my aptitude is poor. I can't withstand such rich spirit chi, so I had to give up. Later, I casually adjusted the position of a few purple gold spirit stones and made it into a spirit-suppressing array. It will make the people in the array unable to mobilize the spirit chi in their bodies and thus make them unable to move, Deacon Sun said with a smile. "Do you intend to trap me to death?" Muyu asked in a low voice. He glanced at the branches at the entrance of the cave and tried to lead them over. Unfortunately, he couldn't touch the branches and couldn't control them. He was a little regretful. He shouldn't have let the tree branch leave his body. He did have some root grasses in his universe in a sleeve, but he couldn't drill into them in front of Deacon Sun. "Let me see." Deacon Sun sat for a while and finally regained the strength to stand up. He staggered along the wall, pulling out a purple gold spirit stone from time to time and stuffing it into another crevice. This process took him a lot of time. Every time he pulled out a spirit stone, he had to take a few breaths before continuing. After he fiddled with the purple gold spirit stones, Muyu suddenly found that he could move again. However, he was surrounded by an invisible barrier and still couldn't get out. "I'll give you a good fortune. Consider it my thanks for not killing me and healing me." Deacon Sun coughed a few times and his face turned pale. He moved a piece of purple gold spirit stone, and then the spirit chi around Muyu began to become incomparably rich. The pure spirit chi continuously washed Muyu's body, and the spirit chi in his body also began to circulate. The array forced out all the spirit chi contained in the purple gold spirit stone and poured it into the array. Cultivating under such conditions could achieve twice the result with half the effort. Muyu was shocked to feel the rich spirit chi around him. He felt that if he cultivated here for a day, it would be equivalent to cultivating outside for a month. It was really extravagant to spend so many purple gold spirit stones on himself. "You should stay here and cultivate properly. I've estimated that these spirit stones will probably trap you for a month. You're a good kid, and I don't want you to die. You should be free after a month. As for me," Deacon Sun smiled bitterly, "I don't think my body can hold on for a month. Do you still want to go to the school?" Muyu felt very sad. Deacon Sun was still kind at the bottom of his heart. He knew that he didn't have much time left, So he actually gave Muyu such a great opportunity. In order to prevent the Grey disciples from being bullied in the future, Deacon Sun planned to take away a few more pretentious self-cultivators before his life came to an end. He believed that the Grey disciples would be better off if there were fewer such self-cultivators in the world. He couldn't liberate all the Grey disciples, so he could only rely on this method to reduce the Grey disciples' pain. If I'm still alive after a month, I'll come back here and slowly wait for my death. At that time, I hope you can bury me on a high mountain after I die. It's best if it's a place where I can see Qingshou City. I hope that one day I can see Qingshou City's school destroyed. Deacon Sun looked at Muyu quietly. His biggest wish in this life was to become a cultivator with his head held high. But now it seemed impossible. He understood that all this was caused by the Grey disciple system of the school. His current injustice was that the school no longer had Grey disciples, and the Grey disciples no longer served all the self-cultivators so humbly. However, now that the Qingsong Taoist and Reverend Jihua had become nascent soul supremacies, even if the Qingsong Alliance and Qingsong Alliance were established in the future, it wouldn't change the status of the Grey disciples in the slightest. With the Qingsong Taoist and Reverend Jihua, it was impossible for the school to disappear, and the Grey disciples would continue to come in. More and more Grey disciples came in waves to enter the school. Every Grey disciple had the goal of becoming an immortal, so they silently endured the attitude of the high and mighty Alliance disciples. They didn't dare to resist when they were beaten or scolded, and they didn't have the ability to resist. Deacon Sun had lived his whole life looking at other people's faces, so he knew the sorrow well. He hoped that this kind of sorrow wouldn't appear on the younger generation with poor talent. Muyu looked at him. This old man, who had lived such a sad life, was kind, sensible, and full of killing intent. He used the rest of his life to reap the lives of self-cultivators, so that the Grey disciples' lives could be slightly smoother. Deacon Sun was powerless to change the injustice of the self-cultivator world. He could only rely on his own meager strength to maintain a little justice. His justice was bloody, but he didn't know if it was the right path. Should the Grey disciples be ordered around by others? Should the self-cultivators who bullied the Grey disciples be killed? Was Deacon Sun right to kill those arrogant self-cultivators? Who could tell if the path in this world was righteous or evil? Muyu remembered what his master often told him. When you feel that you have a clear conscience, your path is righteous. Deacon Sun did this with a clear conscience. He only killed those who bullied the Grey disciples and didn't kill Muyu. In his eyes, his path was righteous. Are you really not going to consider what I said? Muyu's heart was very heavy. He knew that if Deacon Sun continued to do this kind of thing, sooner or later, he would become the public enemy of the self-cultivator world. The people of the school weren't fools. One day, they would find Deacon Sun and catch him. When that time came, Deacon Sun's fate would be very miserable. Follow you to the falling dust sect and be your servant. Deacon Sun asked with a smile. He gradually remembered Muyu from 2 years ago. At that time, Muyu told Deacon Sun very seriously that if Muyu had the ability one day, he would definitely come back to help Deacon Sun leave the school. You know that's not what I meant. I just want to help you. Muyu shook his head. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Deacon Sun stood up for him at that time, and Muyu would never forget this. Actually, I've heard about you. I know that your name is Muyu, and I also know that you defeated the insufferably arrogant genius of Qingsong School, Xiaohu. Your future is limitless, and I can't have great achievements. I've been a servant my whole life, so it makes no difference to me to be your servant. However, I know the current situation in the self-cultivator world. Those disciples told me that the self-cultivator world will only have Qingsong School and Jiuhua School in the future. If I follow you, I'm afraid those people won't let me go. Instead, I'll implicate you. Deacon Sun sighed. Maybe Muyu had the ability to save him from the abyss of suffering, but what he had done now meant that he could no longer have a foothold in the self-cultivator world. Once the matter was exposed, what awaited him would be a disaster. He couldn't be a burden to anyone else. When I was bullied by Xiao Hu as a gray disciple, you spoke up for me. Do you know how important that was to me? You show me another side of the self-cultivator world, and I've always been grateful to you. I just want to repay you. I dare to provoke Qingsong School and Jiuhua School. Do you think I'm afraid of being implicated by you? Muyu said. Deacon Sun was silent. He didn't expect that his actions at that time would make Muyu so grateful, but he was unwilling to let those people go. For a quarter of an hour, no one spoke. The two of them were silent. Then, Deacon Sun broke the silence. 1 month. I'll stop after 1 month. If I'm still alive after 1 month, you can do whatever you want. After Deacon Sun finished speaking, his face suddenly revealed a pained expression. He roared and jumped up high. All the bones in his body were trembling. Then, he turned back into a soul-devouring wolf. There was no trace of ferocity in the soul-devouring wolf's eyes. There was only the vicissitudes and tiredness of Deacon Sun's life, which were full of desolation. Deacon Sun shook his body. Turning back into a wolf made him feel less painful. Sometimes being a wolf seemed to be easier than being a human. He slowly left the cave. About 2 hours later, Deacon Sun came back with a string of fruits and a few demonic beasts in his mouth. He howled twice in a low voice and then never came back. Muyu's mood was very complicated. He looked at the mellow spirit gathering formation and understood that he would have to stay in this formation for a month. Now that his master's whereabouts were unknown and his cultivation was not high, it was impossible for him to compete with the Qingsong Taoist, let alone the red-clothed young man behind the Qingsong Taoist. The most important thing for him now was to improve his strength. Chapter 93. In the world of cultivators, there were always all kinds of unreconciled things. Everyone always wanted to do something to fill the unwillingness in their hearts, even if that thing was insignificant. Because they didn't have the ability to subvert the whole world, they wanted to improve a little. Deacon Sun returned to the academy. He thought that if there were fewer self-cultivators who did not know how to respect others in the cultivation world, the gray disciples would have a better life in the future. Therefore, he wanted to do his best to improve the situation. Muyu also didn't like the darkness and fighting in the world of cultivators. In this world where strength was respected, those with higher cultivation would rule those with lower cultivation. For treasures, brothers could turn against each other, but for selfish desires, human lives didn't matter. In the world of cultivators, the evil of human nature was obvious. However, Muyu still loved this world. He had people he cared about, and the people he cared about also cared about him. Because of the fetters, he knew what he wanted to pursue. Muyu knew what he lacked. It was time and strength. He had his own talent, but he didn't have time to develop it. Time didn't give him enough strength. Therefore, when Deacon Sun gave him good fortune, he understood that this was his chance. Pure spiritual energy rolled in and shrouded Muyu's body. Muyu sat quietly with his legs crossed. The spiritual energy in his body was already rotating, leading the spiritual energy into his body and circling around his dantian. The spiritual energy entered the body and was transformed into spiritual energy through his dantian, broadening the meridians in the body. It was a slow process, but in this spirit-gathering array, the speed increased by 100 times. Under the guidance of the falling dust cultivation method, a steady stream of spiritual energy washed the meridians in his body. He absorbed the spiritual energy over and over again, even forgetting the time. He only knew that this precious spiritual energy might be hard to come by in the future. 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to 1 month of cultivation in the past. This kind of terrifying cultivation speed would make anyone ecstatic. At this moment, the world of cultivators was very peaceful. Every sect had no choice but to compromise because they didn't have the ability to resist. Nascent soul venerables could cover the sky with one hand. If they didn't agree, the foundation left by their ancestors would be destroyed. But if they agreed, the foundation would remain, just under a different name. Everyone knew that whether it was the Pine Tree Alliance or the Jiuhua Alliance, It was impossible for them to place so many disciples in the same place. The mountain gate of each school would not disappear just like that. Instead, it would continue to exist in the form of submitting to the two great schools. However, it was likely that each school would be managed in the same way as the Qing-Song School and the Jihua School by a designated leader. The so-called Qing-Song School Alliance and Jihua Alliance were just names. In reality, every disciple would still be in their own school, but the cultivation methods they would receive would be uniformly regulated by either the Qing-Song School or the Jihua School. The Qing-Song School or the Jihua School would also send elders to each school. In this way, they would gradually change a school, encroach on a school, and turn the school into a subordinate of the Qing-Song School. After all, reform needed to be done step by step. It was unrealistic to change the current structure of every sect all at once. The cultivation world seemed to be very peaceful, but in reality, it was surging with undercurrents. The Jihua School and the Qing-Song School were secretly interfering with the choices of the people of each school. The people of the small schools were already in a state of panic. No matter which school they chose, they would offend the other school. Moreover, the opinions within the schools were not unified. Many schools even had internal strife. Because of this, the Qintian School's Boyang Daoren sat in the seat of honor with an ashen face. The several elders below him were already arguing endlessly about which school to join. Naturally, it's better to join the Qing-Song School. The Qing-Song Taoists used to suppress Zhenren Jihua. The strength of the Qing-Song School is also obvious to all. If we join the Qing-Song School, it will also be beneficial for the future development of our school. A red-faced old Taoist insisted on his opinion. Senior brother Bu Yuan, you're wrong. The Qing-Song Taoist disciple, Xiaohu, was killed. The murderer has yet to be brought to justice. We all know that this matter must have been done by the Jihua School. However, the Qing-Song Taoists did not go to the Jihua School to ask for an explanation. Doesn't this mean that the Qing-Song Taoist is afraid of Zhenren Jihua? In my opinion, joining the Jihua School is the right choice. A gray-robed nun sneered. This nun looked to be in her 40s and was still charming. However, she was actually in her 80s, and her cultivation level was at the first layer of the Golden Core realm. Junior Sister Boa, everyone knows that you had an ambiguous relationship with the Jihua School's Taoist Seven Birds. I'm afraid you're saying this because you can't wait to see your old lover, right? A short and fat old Taoist with a curly beard laughed. Bopping, if you talk nonsense again, I'll cut off your tongue. Reverend Boa glared at him with her almond-shaped eyes. Come and try if you have the ability. Old Taoist Bopping said, while twirling his beard. Are you guys done messing around? Do you still have any respect for me, the head of the school? Boyang Daoren slapped the table, and the wooden table turned into powder. The school is about to perish. Instead of thinking about how to continue the incense of your ancestors, you're thinking about how to submit to others and who to submit to. In the future, how will you face your ancestors in the underworld? Taoist Bo Xing, who had a goatee and had not spoken, smiled. Head of the school, you know the current situation better than anyone else. If the inheritance left by our ancestors is so useful, why can't our school raise its head in the cultivation world? Now, we can only go with the flow. Maybe we can give our school a chance to survive. What's more, Taoist Bo Xing suddenly showed a mocking expression. It doesn't matter whether or not we have any respect for you, the head of the school, because in the future, the head of this school may change hands. Impudent. Boyang Daoren stood up. His cultivation base of the 5th layer of Jindan burst out. He angrily looked at Taoist Bo Xing, and the anger in his heart could no longer be concealed. The other people's faces changed. Taoist Bo Xing also stood up. He was forced to retreat a few steps by Boyang Daoren, but he still had a smile on his face. Senior brother, so what if your cultivation base is high? You can only vent your anger on us. How will you face Reverend Jihua? Reverend Jihua said that whoever is in charge of this school will be in charge of it. Bo Xing, what do you mean by that? Could it be that you've been bribed by Jihua School? Wei Yuan also stood up and scolded. Bo Xing lazily glanced at his fellow apprentices and said, I can't say that I've been bribed. I'm indebted to Reverend Jiuhua for taking a fancy to me. I'm just adapting to the circumstances. Head of the school, you've been in charge for so many years, but our school has never been able to develop. Not to mention that you've also appreciated and had a good personal relationship with a ridiculous falling dust school. If you don't think about making progress, you'll be letting down your ancestors. Daoist Bo Xing fearlessly looked at Boyang Daoren. The elders of the Jihua school had already found him and promised that if the Qiantian school surrendered to the Jihua school, they would support him to become the new head of the Qiantian school. With the support of the elders of the Jihua school, what did he have to fear? Brother Bo Xing's words are reasonable. It's just a pity that young Master Bai Liang of the Qing Song School also came looking for me a few days ago. Like you, I adapt to the circumstances. I'm afraid that we'll have to serve different masters in the future. The Qiantian school may not necessarily have you as the head of the school. The short and fat Taoist Bo Ping said unhurriedly. You, Boyang Daoren, looked at his two fellow apprentices. They had already switched sides and were beginning to deceive their masters and destroy their ancestors to discuss who would become the head of the school. Boyang Daoren suddenly laughed. He felt very sad. His fellow apprentices had been arguing for decades, but he always thought that everyone was working hard for their own school. He didn't expect that it was just his own wishful thinking. When disaster strikes, everyone flies separately. This sentence was really right. Good, good, good. Boyang Daoren said good 3 times in a row. The momentum of his whole body suddenly dissipated, and he suddenly became so old. After becoming the head of the Qiantian school, he had been cautious and conscientious, not daring to slack off for even a moment. He only hoped that the Qiantian school could get out of its current predicament as soon as possible. And this year, his disciple Gu Yitian had finally fought hard and won 3rd place. He had already seen the hope of the school's future. The development of the Qiantian school was just around the corner, but he didn't want to be directly extinguished by 2 nascent soul cultivators. Now that his fellow apprentices had also begun to rebel, for a moment he was isolated and helpless. A wave of tiredness hit him, and he felt very tired. You guys very good. Taoist Bo Yang slowly turned around. His body suddenly became crooked, as though he was an old man in his twilight years, causing others to feel sad for him. He didn't look at his fellow apprentices who were still arguing. He left the hall alone and walked to the back of the mountain. He came to the ancestral hall of the ancestors and knelt down in front of the ancestors. Master! Gu Yitian also came in and knelt down beside Boyang Daoren. He was not good with words, and he didn't know what to say at this moment. Yitian, do you also think that I'm useless? Boyang Daoren's voice was no longer as cheerful as before. It became very sad, as if he had suddenly aged more than 10 years. The heavy burden of the school had been on him for so many years, and he had persevered. But today, he was bitterly disappointed. He couldn't help but ask himself, what had he been persevering for so many years? No, Master, it's them who are ungrateful and deceiving you. I know that the people from Qing Song School and Jihua School came to you first, but you rejected them. That's why they were successful. No matter what Master does, I believe that Master is right. Gu Yitian said firmly. Boyang Daoren looked at Gu Yitian with relief. At least there was someone who supported him. Although Gu Yitian was usually stubborn and didn't listen to anyone in the school, he only listened to Boyang Daoren. That day, Boyang Daoren took a fancy to Gu Yitian from a group of great disciples and took him as his disciple. Although Gu Yitian's talent was mediocre, he was hardworking. A few months ago, he defeated the geniuses of other schools, making everyone look at him in a new light. Boyang Daoren's proudest thing in his life was taking Gu Yitian as his disciple. With your talent, I'm afraid that Qing Song School and Jiuhua School will take you away. Your future is not in Qiantian School, and I don't want to restrict you. No matter which school you join, I won't object. I just hope that when Qiantian School faces a crisis in the future, you can help it. I'll be satisfied. Boyang Daoren lit 3 incense sticks and inserted them into the incense burner. He bowed respectfully, picked up the horsetail whisk, and brushed the dust off the memorial tablet. Master, I'm a disciple of Qian Tian school. I won't join any school. Wherever master is, I'll be there. Gui Tian said. Boyang Daoren smiled. You don't have to comfort me. I'm old. Following me will only delay you. It's enough that you have the heart. If you don't want to join Qing Song School and Jihua School, then go down mountain. Go as far as you can. Go to a place where they can't find you. The path of body cultivation is too difficult. You have to go on by yourself. If you have the ability, go out of the Maiyun Mountains and explore the outside world. The ancient books left by the ancestors said that the real cultivation world is outside the Maiyun Mountains. Unfortunately, it's too difficult to go out. There are many high-level monsters there. If you want to go out, you must be careful. Gu Yiqian shook his head. Master, I won't go. Don't. Boyang Daoren patted Gu Yiqian on the shoulder. Don't worry. I won't go to the underground to meet my ancestors so soon. Those heartless guys deceived their masters and destroyed their ancestors. If I leave, the ancestral hall won't be safe. I won't care about the school in the future. They can do whatever they want. As long as I'm alive, I'll guard it. I can't protect the foundation left by the ancestors, but I can't let others tarnish the memorial tablet of the ancestors. Gu Yiqian looked at Boyang Daoren. He knew how to go. He kowtowed 3 times to Boyang Daoren, then turned and left without saying anything. He didn't have the ability to protect his master or his school now. Only by becoming stronger could he change all of this. The road he walked was difficult and dangerous, but he had to go on for the belief in his heart. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.